We are in pre-conference here at our third Access and Functional Needs conference. We are going to start out with some inclusive meeting practices, but we're going to start with our language justice or language inclusion. We demonstrate this so that we would know how to do this when we're activated and in emergencies, so that we all have this best and promising practices. With that, I'm going to hand this over to our Spanish interpreter, Valentina.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning. My name is Valentina, and I'm here with my colleague, Andrea. We're both here on behalf of Community Language Cooperative, and we're here to provide and guarantee your commitment to language justice. Language justice is a type of simultaneous interpretation that seeks to create spaces in which no one language is dominant, spaces in which everyone can participate with the language of their heart. So to achieve this objective, we will be using Zoom's interpretation feature. So if you need any interpretation in Spanish, you can request a device if you're in person. Otherwise, what you're going to do online is that in a couple of minutes, a new little button that looks like a globe will appear on the bottom bar of your screen. And this button looks like a globe, and you will go ahead and click on it and select either English or Spanish as both the language that you will be listening into and speaking into. If you're joining the meeting on a phone or on a tablet, you will find the same options by clicking on the button with the 3 little dots on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. This button reads more. Hola a todos, a todas y a todos. Mi nombre es Valentina, estoy aquí con mi colega Andrea, ambas por parte de Community Language Cooperative, para ofrecerles y garantizar su compromiso con la justicia del lenguaje. La justicia del lenguaje es un tipo de interpretación simultánea que busca crear espacios en los que no domine ningún idioma, espacios en los que todos puedan participar con el idioma de su corazón. Para lograr este objetivo vamos a utilizar la función de interpretación de Zoom. Si usted está en el espacio en persona, puede solicitar alguna computadora o algún otro aparato para ingresar por Zoom y utilizar la interpretación. En un par de minutitos, cuando ya esté en esta reunión de manera virtual, verá que en la barra inferior de su pantalla aparece un nuevo botón que parece un globo terráqueo. Cuando lo vea, haga clic en él y seleccione inglés o español como el idioma en el que va a estar escuchando y participando. Si usted está en esta reunión por medio de una tableta o de un teléfono, encontrará las mismas opciones haciendo clic en el botón que tiene 3 puntos en la esquina inferior derecha de su pantalla que dice More o Más. A quick reminder for those of you that do prefer to use English during this meeting, presenters and anyone else participating. We want to remind you that Spanish is 20 to 25% longer than English. So please be aware of your speed. And if anyone has any questions or any issues whatsoever with this technology, please let the whole group know by means of the chat box. Un breve recordatorio es que la interpretación es de forma simultánea, entonces por favor recuerde participar con un ritmo de conversación y si tiene alguna pregunta o algún problema con esta tecnología, por favor comuníquese al grupo completo a través del chat. Listo, vamos a activar los canales de interpretación y asegurarnos de que funcionen bien. Okay, thank you so much for having us. We can go ahead and start the interpretation channels now and make sure that they work correctly.
Tim, if I could get a thumbs up.
Are we both English to Spanish or one and one?
Are we English to Spanish or?
It doesn't matter, either way works, and just make sure to assign both Andrea and myself.
And we went on English.
Good.
All right, we are good. Perfect. All right, well, welcome everyone. As you see, practicing inclusion is worth the time it takes, even if it delays objectives. It's important that we learn from each other and we're able to grow with one another. And sometimes it's a little scratchy, and this whole conference is going to be scratchy, and that's because we're all going to learn from one another. And instead of just planning for, we'll be planning with. We want to let you know safety exits. If we are to evacuate, if we'll go out the doors right over here in this room. I am. Woo, this one's hard, Gabby. But we are practicing inclusive meeting practices for people who have low vision or who are blind. If I am at the front of the room, I'm not sure if my voice is projecting towards the front of the room. If you're facing me, you would be, if you're facing me, it's gonna be your right. We're gonna go all the way out to the right doors and then turn right again and be out in out those doors in the corner over there. For restrooms, if you are facing me, it's gonna be out the doors to the left of you or to the right, but then you would, if you went out the right, you would turn right again and then right again. And then there's the women's restroom, and if you keep going, women's restroom on the left, and then if you keep going, still going straight, the men's is to the left afterwards. If you go out the left doors, you're going to turn left and then left, and the men's will be on the right. And then if you keep going, the women's will be on the right. Woo. That was it. That was scratchy. And I'm still trying to get it right. So, and that's the reason why we call this conference the Getting It Right Conference, because we don't have it right, but we're going to keep trying to get it right. And if it takes one step at a time, I call it, as my colleague Amy talks about how we eat elephants. We call it a sea mist elephant, and sometimes it's a whale. And so you have to eat it one bite at a time. You can't try to eat that whole thing at a time, because look how it was, just how scratchy it was for us to just, some of you who are in the room, we were yellow conferencing on, do you have that? Nope, not yet. Do you have that? Nope, not yet. All right, Sadie, slow down. So that's why we're trying to get this right. And we are open to feedback, because once we get feedback, we're able to keep growing from it. With that, safety exits, restrooms. All right, I think I got those checked. All right, and now we're going to talk about some inclusive meeting practices, because we are hybrid. This is, oh, I'm sorry. First,
You're right.
okay. Inclusive meeting practices still?
They're all on the tables.
Oh, they are on the tables. And then, am I talking about inclusive now or the next slide?
Right here.
Right here, right now. Okay. Alrighty. All right. So again, practicing inclusion is worth the time it takes, even if it delays other objectives. Please exist in the space in ways that are most comfortable for you. You can stand up, sit down, lay down, stretch, walk around, leave the room, stem, use your electronics as needed, and feel free to turn, for those of you who are on online, please feel free to keep your video on or off. And speak as much or as little as you like. However, in the room, if you do not use the mic, I will be coming over and having to repeat what you say, because we want to make sure those who are attending virtually also get the same experience as you in person on the information that's being shared. We are also asking you to limit your conversations at your tables, because we do have a meeting owl, and that owl is so smart that it will pick up. Mike, say hi over there.
Hi, over there.
It picked up Mike, and I'm sure that interpretation also pulled up Mike way over in the other corner. It is a very smart assistive, let me try that again, assistive device that helps for hybrid opportunities to be able to attend equally. We also understand, we want us all to understand that everyone exists in spaces different ways, and how someone can best engage and listen might look different than how you do. So please let us know if we need to slow down or repeat any of the information during this discussion. Especially ASL interpreting and Spanish interpreting take 1.5 to 2 times longer to move change the information into that language. And so we want to make sure that we're able to meet that. We want to ask everybody to, as you're talking, if you're going to talk, say, hey, this is Sadie. I'm Sadie, and I use pronouns she, hers, and hers, and they. Sometimes it depends on how many of us are together. And then we also, and that's to help us better include our, as we begin to learn from one another. We want to respect that from everyone, the individuals and themselves. We don't want to make any assumptions about what people know. We want to focus on solutions, not just admire the problem. We know there's problems. That's why we have this conference, so we can better understand what those problems are and start identifying what those solutions are and how we could work together with them. We would like to speak slowly and one at a time and at a moderate pace for clarity, with clarity and volume. We want to always use the microphone. And then this room is actually looped in. So for those of you who would benefit from a hearing loop, or they have a hearing aid, if you'll turn on your T-coil switch, you'll be able to hear me like I'm in your ear right now. If you would like to use one of those devices, we do have some available right over here if you're looking at me, it's going to be to the left of you. And if you'll raise your hand, one of us will come and get you a hearing loop, and we'll bring it over to you. We also want to announce what accessible resources are available, such as closed captioning. We do, for those of you who benefit from closed captioning, we do have closed captioning here. We are going to get a little scratchy, just so everybody knows. We have to move that to make sure it fits in there. And a lot of times we try to do it before we get in here, but sometimes, as you see, the captioning may be covering up some of our stuff. But Gabby, you might have fixed that. I'm not sure, or Tim. They're pretty magical, Tim and Gabby, just so you know. They help fix all the little, the fine details there. We want to avoid using acronyms. If we're going to use acronyms, please spell them out. Just heard a acronym the other day, COAD, and I was like, COAD, C-O-A-D. Okay, can you please tell me what COAD means? Because it means different to other people. So in that context, they were talking about community organizations active in disaster. We want to practice the 1, 2, 3 practice. So if you're talking more than others around you, count 1, 2, 3 to allow others to have a chance to speak up. If you don't speak up often, try to count 1, 2, 3 to get ready to speak up. We want everybody to exist the way that they best can. Also, in your welcome packets, there is question and answer cards. So if you don't feel comfortable speaking up, write them down and hand it to one of us. We'll make sure we get that answer for you and get it back to you, because a lot of times I don't feel comfortable speaking up in conferences or meetings. Let's see what else. If you end up seeing some service animals here at conference, please be sure to respect that they are working, and don't just go and pet the working animal. That it is a working animal, and it's doing its job to help the individual with whatever that job is. And do not ask personal questions about the handler's disabilities or intrude on their privacy. We are tomorrow, you're really gonna feel a demonstration of how scratchy that gets when we ask those intrusive questions. And we're all gonna experience it together, because we're all about that, learning from one another. Alrighty, and with that, if any of you are posting on social media, please use the hashtags PlanWith, PLANWITH, or hashtag Getting It Right, GETTINGITRIGHT, or hashtag COAFNCONF2023, and then also hashtag Inclusion Matters, INCLUSIONMATTERS. Now, let me tell you how scratchy that is for somebody who didn't know how to learn how to read until 4th grade. Making sure that I'm making sure I'm not also transposing letters. All right. Also in your packets and online, we do have some items here. We're not asking you to just attend a conference. We're asking you to do something about it. You're going to hear me talk a lot when I'm doing some introductions about make a plan, work the plan, protect the plan. And that always starts with a start, stop, continue, or change. If you haven't started it, maybe that's what your plan's gonna be. And then you'll work the plan and protect it. Maybe you need to stop something, and that's the plan that you're gonna do, and you're gonna make the plan, work the plan, and protect the plan. And you get it, continue, as well as change. Those are different ways that you're gonna start walking the walk as you keep working through all of this. We're also gonna ask you, we have some excellent presenters, especially the major subject matter experts that have helped mentor myself as I come into this position, and I force multiply, and why we're all here today are here today. We have June Kales, we have the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies, Melissa Marshall, we have the Atlantis Community Living, Kurt Garrett, and we have Anne-Marie McLaughlin from New York University. These are all my mentors as I continue to learn what I don't know, because I don't know. As well as, I'm sorry, I guess I should also tell you what they're going to be talking about. June is going to be talking about the magical thinking of registries. Oh, Tim, sorry. Back one, please. That's why I got mixed up. So when we're learning from all of these subject matter experts, what we're going to do is I'd like you to identify at least, you're going to be here 3 days, probably, right? It's really only a 1 day and a half conference. However, we try to chunk it up so that everybody has the experience to even enjoy the city here. But we want you to walk away with 3 things I've learned, 2 actions to apply what I learned, and then 1 way you'll share your learnings. And just another hint, we give you all these different ways of being able to make the plan, work the plan, protect the plan. Those 2 actions to apply what I learned are another way that you could identify what your plan is going to be. So, alrighty. And now back to who are presenters and what they're going to be talking about. June Kales helps me better understand the magical thinking of registries and the resource registries, and she's going to really give us some how-tos tied to the must-tos when we're trying to reach all of our community. We have Melissa Marshall and Kurt Garrett. Oh, we have a typo here. We might need to fix that for tomorrow. The Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies in Atlantis, Center for Independent Living. They're going to talk about the independent living movement and systems tied to emergencies and disasters. That's going to help us better understand what they can do and what they can't do before, during, and after emergencies and disasters, and help us be able to start working with them and contracting with them to be able to reach as much community as possible. And then Anne-Marie McLaughlin is going to talk about the Independence During Active Threat Session. And with that, we're going to start our first presentation. And this is going to come from June Isaacson Kales. Gabby, are these alphabetical?
By first name.
Sorry, I have to remember A, B, C, D. All right. June is well known for her pioneering work. She was part of the less than a handful of people with disabilities who focused on emergency issues decades before. Hurricane Katrina, as far back as 1970s and the 80s, June documented the profound and dramatic lack of equal and inclusionary emergency services for people with disabilities. She has worked nationally with FEMA and Centers for Disease Control and the Department of Homeland Security and Health and Human Services on policy planning and training issues. For example, she co-chaired the United States Department of Homeland Security's work group, which developed a functional and medical support sheltering target capabilities list. She worked with FEMA's guidance on planning for integrating of functional needs support services in general population shelters, and was a 9-year member of FEMA's National Advisory Council. In emergencies, people with disabilities continue to lose their health, their independence, and sometimes their lives. The loss is because of information transfer regarding these predictable needs over decades, and lessons observed, relayed, and documented are not integrated into the plans, policies, procedures, training, and exercises. June's work focuses on consistently and repeatedly applying these lessons to be eventually claimed as lessons learned. Gave me chills, June. June believes in the emergency sector's performance depends on resilience and flexibility to evolve as economic, learning, technology, legal, and social landscapes change. As a critical thinker and lifelong learner, she never hesitates to critic and revise her work. So check her out at www.jik.com/mrp.html for current editions of her materials. And I will also, who I think of June is the CMIST, CMIST guru. So on to you.
Hey, Sadie, that intro is longer than my presentation. I always just say to you a hard time. It's my role in life. So good to be here among friends, new friends, old friends. I feel like we're in a learning lab. That this is a hybrid conference learning lab. I mean, I sat here for a half hour listening to everything that goes into this. And I just think it's something we have to learn so we're more inclusive. But boy, is the learning curve steep. I mean, I was taking all kinds of notes like, oh boy, we need to do a orientation for the interpreters. We need to, there's so much that we don't remember to do. So, but this is our new frontier. So we have to do this. So good for you guys. I salute you and keep it up. So can you hear me okay? I tend to move my head a lot, so it's a nightmare sometimes to the mic, but if you can hear me, tell me, because I know this stuff. I don't have to hear myself talk, so please let me know if you can hear. All right, let's see if I can master the slide. Hey, bear with me, people with CP and these little clickers, they don't know, they're not always too compatible, so it might take some time. First, I want to be really clear about the fact that when I'm talking about registries today, I want to really narrow the definition of what I'm talking about. I'm talking about registries for responding and planning for people with disabilities in disasters. Typically, these registries are run by government agencies, and they are voluntary. So I'm not talking about things you sign up for, like sometimes when you sign up for alerts and warnings, from your local area. Some people call that registries. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about something much, much bigger. So we're narrowing the definition, so beware. So the first thing I want to ask you is, okay, think about this to yourselves. Is there a difference between a disaster and an emergency? If there is, what's the difference? This is really key. I think we all, including myself, have been really sloppy about the way we use these terms. So is there a difference? And as you're making your own list or not, I want to remind you, don't worry, you know, I know you have this question about, will I have the slides? You will. They will be loaded onto the app. So you'll get them. So don't worry about not having these or getting something down. You'll have a total set in the app. I got that right, Sadie? Yeah, okay. Also, in my slides, there's a resource section in the back. So everything I'm talking about today is represented in a webinar we did, a part 1 and part 2 webinar that we did in the winter of last year. So you can, those of you who want to do a deeper dive, you're welcome to that 3-hour archive part 1 and part 2 webinar, which I recommend. Also in resource section are questions that we, as people with disabilities, should always ask before we sign up for a registry. Things we need to always understand. So, I think there's no difference between a disaster and an emergency. How many said no difference? And 1, 2, 3. How about the virtual no's?
None.
No virtual no's. Okay. And by the way, how many virtual people do we have joining us today?
14.
14. Okay. And for your virtuals, we'll let you know what the count is in the room when we haven't done it yet. So, all right. Well, there is a big difference. And I'm going to sit down because it's easier for me to sit down and not have to worry about standing up. So at least you have to see what I look like for a minute. Okay, there is a difference. And the difference is that an emergency is urgent, it's sudden, it's immediate, but it's small scale, like a house fire, a traffic accident, some power lines that go down. And you know what? We do really well for the most part in emergencies. They're small. Typically, we have the resources needed to respond. So the focus here is the large events, the disasters. So here's the answer here. Disasters are severe disruptions. They often exceed one community, and they always exceed the resources that the community has to cope with the emergency. They are large, and again, they overwhelm local resources. So across disasters, the consequences for people with disabilities are much the same. It doesn't matter. Fire, earthquake, tsunami, we're at higher risk. We're disproportionately impacted. We're often affected first and worst. And by this time, you probably all know this factoid that people with disabilities are 2 to 4 times more likely to die or sustain a critical injury as compared to those without disabilities across disasters. So let me do a quick poll here. And you virtual people, let me know the numbers back there. Are you somebody who manages a registry? Hand. 1, 2. Only 2, keep the hands up, 2. Okay, and virtually,
I've got not on the registry and no,
No.
nothing.
none, okay. Second question, is there a registry in your area?
Can you define what you mean by that?
For people with disabilities,
1 second,
Right.
1 second.
Just to repeat, can you define what you mean by that?
yes. For people with disabilities, voluntarily sign up to get help in a disaster. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Only 4? And virtually?
2.
2. Okay, so that's 6. How many of you have signed up for a registry? 1. Oh, what's that, 5?
6.
6. Who are you voting for? Are there 6 of you? What do you mean 6?
I work for a community college and we've got 6 students in our residential halls that
Okay,
have
okay,
AFN needs.
thank you. Anyone else signed up for a registry? No one in the room? Whoa, how about virtually?
None.
0.
There, except for one has.
Except for-
access.
Except for
Thank you.
1.
We do have one who signed up as an access and functional needs advocate.
Okay. Okay, have any of you been personally helped by a registry in a response by a registry? Anyone? Seeing nobody in the room? And virtually,
Virtually, we have none.
okay. All right, interesting. Okay, this is what I want to cover. Now, Sadie, I need to do a time check with you. Because we had quite the intro, so how much time do I actually have?
45 minutes.
45 minutes? Whoa, that's a change. I planned for 90. Okay, this will be
35
35 minutes?
minutes. Oh, whenever you could get down, it's up to you. We have this all prepared.
Okay, whatever.
We're gonna go 35 and then we'll start giving you the hook.
I'm clear. So I planned for, as you can see, I planned for 90, so we're gonna have to make some adjustments here. But hey, you know, we're flexible. We often hear emergency managers say, we got this. We can take care of everything. If you register, we will get you help. If you register, we know where you are. And we know how many of you there are, and we got this. So not to worry. And people with disabilities tend to ignore the disclaimers in registries that tell people there's no guarantee. Registries, the harm is that registries give people a false sense of security. And I think I need remedial help with this clicker. Okay, and you know, we'll be there for you. And I know you'll be there for us, so don't worry. It's a magical thinking, and it's easier for us to give up any responsibility for our own planning. And it's kind of seductive. It's really a false sense of security. It diverts energy, not only from us, people with disabilities in thinking about our own plans, our own helpers, our own ways to evacuate, but it also diverts the energy of government and community-based organizations in really developing real plans, strengthening them, embedding them, and sustaining them. So again, registries, there's no guarantee, none. And it doesn't mean that you will get immediate help. But again, those disclaimers are totally ignored by people. It's much easier to just think magically that we will indeed get help. So I like to say that registries represent a degree of symbolic planning, that they're based on guesses of untried, undocumented, and unsuccessful practices, that they lack the specifics of the who, what, where, when, and how. So visually, it looks like this. This is called magical exiting. A young man evacuates from the 8th floor of a brick building with an old style external metal fire escape with steep ladder-like stairs. He floats gently down to the ground, sitting in a lawn chair suspended by about 30 yellow balloons. So if that's not good enough, let's look at this. So the visual here is, I call this the magical scoop up command center. And the caption reads, have no worries, no matter where you are, the chip inserted under your skin allows the highly trained evac corps dispatchers to mobilize teams of pilots to instantly find you. For example, the helicopter pilots, they know your precise location. Today at Joe's Coffee Shop, the team will hoist you up with your service animal, your wheelchair, your scooter, your walker, or whatever. And here you go. 5 evacuate 4 helicopters deploy super scoopers to hoist you up safely and whisk you on harm's way. And just for the close-up here, the helicopter deploys the super scooper to grab and hoist a dangling, terrified, shaking, and teeth-chattering wheelchair user. Amused flying geese approach. Who could ask for better evidence of the effectiveness of the great pluck up? That's P-L-U-C-K, pluck up. So this is this is magical thinking. This is symbolic planning. So next question for all of you is a yes/no question. Think about this. Are registries good planning tools? If yes, why? If no, why? So make your own list. And if I had a little more time, I would
You do have time. I messed up.
go.
I am not the good timekeeper. I usually have Tim timekeep me. This is Sadie speaking. Sorry about that. Yeah, so you actually still have about, I had it. Yeah, you still have at least 40 more minutes.
Okay, give me a 5-minute warning.
Okay.
Thanks. See, Sadie and I are used to working together, so I would give each other a hard time forever. Okay, so think it is a good planning tool? 1, don't be shy, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 twice, 7, whatever, okay. And virtually, how many think it's a good planning tool?
3.
So we have 9 total, okay. Well. It's not. Registries are, I'm not gonna tell you that. Registries are based on a lot of false assumptions that typically go unchallenged. And one of them is everyone will register. Everybody who has needs will register. Well, they won't. Many will not sign up because of a number of reasons. Like, they don't believe they work. There are issues of privacy. There's fear of being tagged as vulnerable. There's concern regarding legal status for themselves or somebody in their family. And their fear of losing their independence. So here's a real example that was given during a House hearing at the federal level. This is Marion County in Florida. Okay, so I'm not going to read you the stench slide, but you'll have it. What is critical on the slide is there are 300, the population is 370,000 people. There are 700 people who signed up for the registry. What percentage is that? I'm not good at math, but it's whatever that is. So 700 as opposed to their data says that 33% of the population have a disability. And there's a number of other numbers here in terms of showing you that these numbers are highly, highly inadequate. And this is pretty typical. This is not a one example of something. This is very, very typical of one of the problems. So in terms of who may need help, it's a very small slice of the pie here. Very small slice. There are better ways. There are better planning tools that we all have access to, and I've listed them here. There's program administrative data from things like the VA, the Social Security, and can't read my other writing here, but there's a lot of local administrative data. There are tools like GIS that can be used. There's great census data. There's social vulnerability index issues data. And there's FEMA's resilience analysis and planning tool data. There's a lot of better data out here than counting on 1% of those needing help to register. So, any burning issues so far? And by the way, my email is jik@jik.com. It's the slide. Send me your questions, send me your challenges, and we'll have more time on Thursday in roundtables for you to challenge everything that I say. Okay, response gap. One of the biggest things that is a major issue in emergency management is what I view as lack of real and honest transparency. That this has to do with building trust and not promoting empty promises. That when registries fail, and they do, it really does erode trust in government. And there's a lot of failure that's documented. And there is registries are promoted in Texas and in Florida. And these, well, when they don't function, when they fail, again, trust is eroded, and it's a big problem. So they're harmful. And what's really troubling is that, for example, the registries in Florida and Texas, there's specific laws related to promoting these. And in Florida, they are mandated. And in North Carolina, it's kind of wishy-washy. They kind of authorize the creation of them. It's really unclear. So what I've learned in some of my research is that legislators are reluctant to pull back, to remove registry regulations, or to allow them to sunset. Because whether based on reality or not, they fear that they may get blamed for some preventable disaster-related deaths, that they might be blamed for them. When in reality, and ironically, an even stronger argument is that there is big liability in allowing these statutes to remain in place. So I think we need to promote and help people understand that there's a large amount of time when people are on their own. I always call it yo-yo. You know what yo-yo is? You're on your own yo-yo. That the first helpers are not the first responders. They're your nearby neighbors, friends, and family, and sometimes serve teams, but those are few and far between. So our messaging needs to be very clear and aimed at popping the magical thinking bubble about registries. We need to expose the overpromise that police, fire, and other first responders will instantly arrive when they will not. There's a long response gap. So it's important to cope with this gap in terms of your own need for personal planning with neighbors, friends, and family. And that's what a real plan involves. Relying on neighbors and reminding neighbors and working with neighbors to check on each other. And just to illustrate this response gap further, you know, on non-disaster days, we have 311, we have 911, we have 211, and now we have 988. And they may work on non-disaster days, but in disasters, they may not work or work well because of the overwhelming call volumes, resulting in very long times, very long waits. So the response capacity isn't always there. In disasters, the big emergencies, registries break. They don't work. So when you're encountering, and I know you all do, when you encounter your emergency managers or others or people with disabilities who say, let's just have a registry. This is all information for you to respond with, to say, what about this? And what about that? And what about what we really know? So I love this quote. This is a myth. This country has a national disaster system that could mobilize an immediate and massive response in the aftermath of a catastrophe. Not so. And I had a friend who's an old emergency manager who used to say, we're the government and we will not be there anytime soon. So think here, we really ought to modernize how people communicate when and if they need help. Now, in the registry model, registries are based on the old inaccurate medical model bias that views people with disabilities as sick, needing help, and therefore easy to locate because they are homebound and they will need help. The facts are that rarely is anyone homebound, and some will need help. Some will need immediate help, and some won't. So scratch that homebound term. People with disabilities are not homebound. Very, 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 very few are actually can't get out of their home. Now, just because you know where I live doesn't mean you know where I am. That's another harmful part of registries, that they're based on a fixed location. You know, we have to really modernize how people communicate if and when they actually need help, versus assuming that we all will always need help. There's a lot of new technology out there that's very helpful for signaling if one needs help. And it eliminates the non-inclusive registry option involving these out-of-date lists, which leads to wasted calls, wasted trips, and wasted time for overstretched, scarce first responders and volunteers. So these two pictures, you know, there's a smartphone, a smart watch, you know, that queries you, I think you've fallen, do you need help? Yes or no, SOS. Activate the SOS if you need help. Or smartphone showing a map and a wheelchair logo with a smart message. So there are all kinds of ways and new apps out there that can help people communicate with a designated group. You know, I need help, or I'm fine. So there's a lot of apps that allow for calling for help by text, by call, by email, or even just by a button press. For example, might be an app on my phone. If I need help, my list is automatically notified. Sadie and Tim and Gabby, they know maybe one of them will be around to help. And that could be a longer list. So we need to really focus more on improving the technology and how people signal for help. There's all kinds of apps out there. Don't ask me the name of them because they keep changing the name, but look in your app store and you'll see them. So what we really, really need to focus on are the partnerships. Those are about the real solutions. Strengthening these partnerships, using these broad community connectors are far more likely to result in good outcomes for disaster impacted communities, then a separate voluntary collection of perishable registry list. So planning with the community and planning with us. And this kind of planning, it's not a one-time meeting. It's really planning together over months and years to develop and refine and sustain the agreement, the solution, who's going to do what. Very broad group that includes the BOADs and government and community-based organizations that we have to rely on. For example, who? You know, the business community is often not on our list, but really needs to be, as our employee resource groups for corporations. The suppliers, our vendors, the retail people can be of tremendous help if we plan together with all of these key players in evacuation, in transportation, and in logistics and delivery of food, of water, of spice. We don't hear our planning groups talk a lot about using UPS, about using Amazon, about using drones, about using the big box stores, about using oxygen suppliers. You know, where's Kmart and Walmart and Home Depot and Costco and all this? They've got to be part of our table. And transit, you know, I've read hundreds of plans that say paratransit is our go-to resource. Well, they're busy. They have their own system, they have people in their system. They are not immediate responders at all. So what's the plan? What about the assets from the airports, from Lyft, from Uber, from community-based groups? If you have a Lyft or Uber, I'm an urban person, so, but to think broadly about this and not magically. And I can go on and on with examples here, but we really have to be much more inclusive about who are the community connectors who will be there, and what are we going to call them and who to do what. These people will reach more people because their lists are current. Registry lists never remain current. And just a footnote, a reality note, we'll never reach everyone because all of these groups will never be inclusive of everyone who may need assistance. And that's why we need that two-way communication system so people can let us know who does need help and where they are. So there are people who don't affiliate with any of these groups who may indeed need help. So again, they real specific planning. If our groups are going to be life safety check people, if they're going to make the calls, you know, to do what, and then who will deliver what's needed and how. And just the number of things on the slide that need to be planned for: transportation, personal assistance, temporary and permanent housing. So this all involves putting in place agreements, contracts that we often overlook. Now, not everything can be done in a volunteer mode. These practices need specific agreements about who is going to do what. So this was a slide that got in the wrong place. I don't know why, but the question to you is, do you know of documented evidence that disasters work for people with that registries work for people with disabilities? Is there any evidence? Yes or no? Does anybody have any evidence that they work? I'm curious about the university. You said 6 people. How does that work in the dorm? The mic is coming.
So when students sign up, they can self-identify as having a disability or, you know, some sort of access need. And when that happens, they meet with our, I don't remember what the title is, I think transition specialist. And that information is shared with our housing department. And we proactively try to figure out what they would need in a emergency situation. And we build a roster of them, so when our first responders get on campus, and as you said, you know, we can't know exactly where they are, but we can know what rooms specifically we should be looking for someone who may be in a wheelchair, for example.
But it's voluntary.
Yes, it is voluntary.
Okay. So do you have evidence that this works?
Just in drills, we haven't had a real emergency, thankfully.
Right. Any evidence? Thank you. I hope you don't mind that taking on you.
If I can-
Yeah,
This is Anne Marie McLaughlin from NYU. And similar to my friend over here, we have, Andrew, we have a registry, which is great for the overnights. But again, as your slide pointed out, just because we know where you live doesn't mean we know where you are. So we can be prepared for that. However, you know, during the day, where are people? We don't know necessarily.
and frankly, you know, many of us remember living, maybe some of us remember living on campus, living in a dorm. Those first responders are not going to be there quickly. We need to get a grip here. They are not going to be there quickly. You know, we were on our own. Yo. So, okay. Any evidence from any of you? I'm looking for the evidence.
Over here.
Yeah, over here.
I'm Jessica. So with our registry that we have, it doesn't always help on the initial evacuations, but when we have pre-evacs and we're planning for events to increase, that's when we pull out the registry, we call them, see what they need, where they'll be, and it helps with those plans.
You know, it's a planning
Further out.
tool.
It's more of a planning tool, but yeah, but we do need to make sure that they understand if it's right now you need to evacuate, we may or may not be able to get to you. But it
Okay,
helps for when they're in the pre-evacuation stage or long lengthy times that we're waiting for if the event's gonna get
so
worse.
again, your fallback on this planning tool and how many will register.
And then we find that most of over half of the people, when we go to contact them, they've moved or are no longer with us.
So the list is very perishable, hard to update. Okay, but I don't hear evidence here. I'm asking about evidence that these things work. Evidence. And thank you for that, appreciate it. Any virtual evidence?
None.
Okay. Well, I would like researchers to focus on this, you know, to really tell us what does work. And I think it's all about the community connectors. And to focus on what's the new technology that works in terms of signaling for help? Because I may or may not need help. And how are you going to know? So what are the collaborative solutions? And I think this is really key. And unfortunately, my
June,
experience.
this is Sadie. There is one hand up in the,
Okay, hang on. My experience is that when these research projects exist, that they're few and far between, and they go sideways. In terms of answering the question of, is there evidence that these registries really do what they say? They start to study the registry budget or the mechanics of the registry. And, you know, it's confidentiality maintained, how our names collected. But they really do not look at, is there evidence that the response indeed works? And so one of my pet peeves is that we need to be part of this identifying the registry research and being part of the entire process, not just what I sometimes call a kind of a token advisory group that meets with the researchers so the researchers can tell us what they're going to do. That's not good enough. We've got to be part of the entire process from beginning to end. Don't tell us what you're going to do. Get us to do a nice little head shake, and then that's it for the advisory obligation of one and done. Question, you said?
Yes, on virtual, and so they could go ahead and unmute their mic and speak up. Who is it, Gabby?
Daryl.
Daryl, if you'll go ahead and unmute.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, June. I appreciate all the information, and you're mimicking a lot of stuff. Actually, I want to say that you're mimicking a lot of the stuff I'm finding, but I'm finding a lot of stuff that you've already expressed, and I'm using some of your research in my PhD studies. And as a person with disabilities and being registered here at University of Alaska Fairbanks, I understand what you're saying, and I do look at where some of these registries have been and their use in some emergencies. And what I've found so far, going exactly to your question, no, they are not being used. No, they are not functional. And it's not just here at UAF. I've been in touch with several other emergency response organizations who have registries, and they say, no, it doesn't work at all. And a lot of times it's mainly due to, as you've already reiterated, call volume to the emergency center. The people are not at the location that they're registered at. As someone else said, the registry is out of date because there's no requirement to update it. So it's, as I say, it was a solution looking for a problem, and it didn't fit at all.
I like that solution, looking for a problem.
I use that quite often. Please, by all means, use it in your research too.
I like that. Okay, well, that leads into, you know, what is all this about? This is about a call for action from you. You gotta make this real. You've got to partner in the planning and partner in the response. You got to hold government accountable and other organizations accountable by speaking out and challenging and not accepting the unsupported use of registries. It does nobody a service. There's no evidence of the impact or outcome. You know, registries are like urban myths, or maybe they're like weeds. You know, they're hard to stop and they keep popping up. Like a game of whack-a-mole, you know. You finally convince some people that this doesn't work, and then you look at the next jurisdiction over and they're just starting to plan for a registry. So don't allow this history and this poor planning to repeat itself. And here's an example, and this is a really recent example, and I haven't had time to go after them yet, but this is from FEMA, Mike, FEMA, and from AARP, one of their very current publications that said, gives advice to people. Let people register in advance. People in the impacted area get a call whether they need help or not. Untrue. People are very grateful. It makes them feel a bit safer, a little bit less panic. Now, this is not from 20 years ago. This is from last year. AARP and FEMA published this, right? So we will have to hold these people accountable. We have to ask the hard questions. We've got to be part of the teamwork. You know, given what's going on out here with the increasing frequency and intensity and scale and duration and of these disasters, these public health issues, climate change issues, natural and human caused disasters are owed to deteriorating infrastructure related disasters. We've got to kind of create better plans with real solutions, because, you know, like it or not, this is our new normal. And maybe it's our new abnormal in terms of a future. So we need to live with this for the long term. And that's not a very comfortable thought, I know, to end with, but that is really, you know, the reality out here. These efforts can no longer be the work of just us weird people in this room who focus on disability and disasters. We've got to broaden our bench. We've got to include more people in this work so that we can protect our own health, safety, and independence and successfully cope with what's coming our way. And these are just some of the fatal flaws there. So I'm gonna stop and ask you to bring on the challenges. You know, we don't have a lot of time, but we have a little time. So what do you think? Are you the choir or not? Or yeah.
They're quiet because we asked them to. I'm just joking for the L.
No, I said, are you the choir? Are you the choir, not quiet?
Losing hearing, I've been told that the last month, so sorry, I make up words.
Hi, June, I'm Mary. I wanted to just maybe more of a question for you. We were considering in our mitigation planning, we were considering a new tool. It's Community Connect tool, and it's a registry of sorts, but more for day-to-day, for emergencies. For the small scale, people could self-identify and register and say, at my house, there's a person who uses a wheelchair, or at my house, everyone in the family is deaf. And then first responders, it actually works with their tone. So when they get a call at that residence, it tells them whatever information people want to share. So I'm wondering, it seems fraught to me, but it might be a way for us to learn more about our community on a granular level, but I don't know. I'm not convinced it's the right thing to do. I've got a lot of people that are, let's do it. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, because I think we do create the expectation day to day. I don't know. I just wanted to see your thoughts on utilizing the system.
I think we need to be really skeptical and ask all the questions, even though it's only emergency based, you know, small events. The only thing I know that I like, and it's pricey, and many places cannot afford it, is Smart 911, because it's a registry for everyone. Anybody can register. You know, my 99-year-old grandfather lives with us. He doesn't walk, you know. So everyone knows that, and he's on 20 medications. Okay, here's what. So, but they pay for that, it's current, but just one more registry. Not from, no. Yeah, over here.
Hi, June, Denise Bradshaw. And kind of following on what Mary just said, I think when you talk about the registry being a tool, I think it needs to be one tool in the many tools that we need to be looking at in our toolbox. And the reason I say that is because, yes, it's nice for first responders to know in their local communities where first to look, but we also need to be looking at from, the inside out, those people being prepared and working directly with them and developing that network of who are those trusted persons that you can reach out to say, hey, I'm still here. No one has come to get me, or I need help, but there's got to be some kind of a network, built from that person out, as well as the first responders in, and including, all the tools in the toolbox to register.
The part of what I agree with you upon is we have to do the hard work of helping people create their own plans. That's the tool that works. The registries are not a tool in a toolbox. They really don't work, and they're more harmful than helpful. And with our limited energy, there's a lot that we can do that's gonna better address real solutions and not overpromise. That's a key word I want you to remember, overpromising. Registries overpromise. Sadie, how we doing on time?
We have Amy with the question.
Hi, June, it's Amy. I'm in your choir. The thing that keeps coming up for me is that expectations management, that it's nearly impossible to get people to have the same expectation about what it means to sign up for something. Both on the side of community, when I am the person that is signing up for something, but also on the side of the limited number of people, the limited number of responders that we have in the case that, great, you have a list, but if you don't have enough people to be able to go out and sort of meet the expectation that somebody's gonna come to me at my house, there's the next sort of point of failure along the sort of registry cascade. And so to go back to your question about research, I'm really curious whether research about social capital that exists in communities on a regular basis, like how many strong bond relationships do you have? How many, people, or what percentage of your community volunteers? The information about how informal social networks meet needs on a regular basis would have better, lines to follow in terms of solutions about if this can work up to this point, is there a way to expand that capacity? Or is this something where, the agreements that you talked about, like really formalizing some parts of what works informally needs to step in? So I guess my long way around to the question is, in terms of the partnerships, in terms of the agreements that you were talking about, how do we take sort of professional emergency management roles and spaces and focus on the conversation about our organizing responsibility is community organizing rather than just operations organizing?
Yeah, it's a hard question. It's a hard road to go, but I think if we are solution-based, we keep repeating that what we know what doesn't work, we need research on what does work, because that social capital, making connections with neighbors and friends who live close by, and y'all get to each other, and you don't need to drive. You know, we need to begin to document how well some of that does work and when it works, instead of continuing to focus on this, the magical beliefs. And you said a lot more than that, Amy, that I couldn't keep up with, but I like the word social capital but we need to layer that. What are all those pieces? And let's do that research. Let's focus on the real work. And I think we have one or no?
Do we have any online? None, and I think we have one last one, and we'll go over here, and it is it a statement? Is it a statement or a question? All right, let's talk about this after. We're waiting for questions, just so we could stay online, and we could, she has something to share with you afterwards. All right. Okay.
I'll be here the whole time. You can bring on your challenges. You can give me our time. That's why I'm here. I like that whole time.
Yeah, can you help us to continue to grow? Question? So for thoughts, just so we could stay on time, can we do that right afterwards? And then and we could answer any last final question, because we need a break. And then we're also getting refreshments coming in around 2. And then we still have 2 more great presenters coming. We're going a little bit further behind. Did you need me, Gabby?
Did we decide no more questions?
Oh, there is one online?
Yes.
Okay, what's the, go ahead and let me bring this.
Question or statement?
It's a statement, okay?
A
All
hand
right.
raised, okay.
If it's a statement, we'll go ahead and we'll reflect those ones after.
Let's ask Daryl, do you have a question or a statement?
Oh, sorry, it's a brief question. It's a question, maybe not so much just for June, but probably for everyone. I'm starting to ask this in my research. Not counting the disability liaison, how many individuals with disabilities or of a vulnerable population are on the emergency management planning staffs? So this goes to the point of, why should we have able-bodied people telling us how to rescue yourself, how to deal with you? Why not have somebody with a disability inside that's also trained on emergency management rather than just a liaison? I get liaisons, they're wonderful, they're great positions from the FEMA headquarters all the way down to the local levels. But how many of them are fully trained and fully engaged in the emergency management process?
So
That's
Daryl, I love that question. This is Sadie, and I could actually answer for at least Colorado, as we have a Homeland Security Advisory Council, Access and Functional Needs Subcommittee, and we have people with lived experience helping us. We also have part of there, we have support service providers helping us as we keep growing and learning the how-tos to help support our community members with disabilities and others with access and functional needs. I love the question. Let's ask it across every county, every state, every local area, because it starts a conversation to see, are you part of the are you part of that planning process? And as we keep learning to grow in our access and functional needs subcommittee, we keep asking the question, who's also missing? Because we still need to learn from others as well. All right, with that, we've been going for about an hour and a half, and I do want to be mindful of movement before people start getting a little too tired. So we're going to go ahead and break for about, we'll be back at 1:38 Mountain Time, 1:38 Mountain Time, or 3:38 Eastern Time. and I can't do the Pacific time. So we're gonna go on those two. We'll go from there, and then we'll come back with our next presenters.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand. I think it's really good. I mean, I oppose that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, counselor.
I'm about that. So I'm feeling different, and I'm so.
Yeah.
You know, the.
All right, we're gonna start coming back, and because we have the owl, we need to ask everybody to cut it off. Hey, Mike, Mary, cut it off, please. They've helped me learn how to do that sign. Only because our owl does pick up everybody who is talking, and we want to make sure it's also picking up our presenters. And so let's say thank you to June. June, that was excellent. Thank you. We appreciate you. We continue to learn and grow from you, and you always ask the hard question, and then we come to grow together. Daryl also, his hard question as well, helps us just keep getting better. Well, I'd like to now introduce our next two presenters talking about the independent living movement and systems tied to emergencies and disasters. We have Kurt Garrett that started at Atlantis in June 1st, 2020. I remember when you started at Atlantis, we became friends quick. Yeah, somehow there was this virus or something that really helped us become friends quickly. After 27 years of working with Denver Parks and Rec, he is the third generation native Colorado, and he loves hanging out with his wife and two dogs. He is active, being active, and he is huge local sports fan. In 2011, he attended FEMA's Get Real conference. How funny, in 2017, that's when I met Melissa and June at the 2019 Getting It Right conference. Well, it seems like was it the same one?
Yeah.
Cool, they just changed it, changed the name. That's awesome. Where he heard about the tragic story of the woman who drowned during Hurricane Katrina because she had no way of getting out of her home. His goal for Atlantis is being a national model in sharpening and sustaining culture of preparedness throughout the whole community. This will include community engagement, organizing and leadership development, advocacy and public policy, training and education, disability-led response, and community resilience. And also, you could find all of our presenters' bios on the app. If you have not downloaded it, please be sure to download the app. And then we also have Melissa Marshall. I'm almost there. A, B, C, D. There it is, sorry. All right, and Melissa has over 30 years experience managing disability rights programs, projects, and organizations. She has a Juris Doctorate from the University of Connecticut. If you see that in the app, JD stands for Juris Doctorate, School of Law, and is admitted to the bar in Connecticut, and has been training with providing technical assistance in Americans with Disability Act, or ADA, locally and nationally since its passage. Melissa has also provided training and technical assistance in the Individuals with Disability Education Act, or IDEA. I think of IDEA now as inclusion, disability, equity, and accessibility. So see, now we know why we want to do acronyms, huh? The other federal state disability rights laws and other federal state disability rights laws. She has a background in disability policy and is both broad and deep. Areas of particular interest include equity of people with disabilities and disasters and public health emergencies. Equity for people who identify as women with disabilities, employment for disabled people, closing congregate institutions for disabled people, including psychiatric institutions. Equity for people found not guilty for reasons by reasons of insanity, disability inclusive public health practices, ending outpatient for people with mental health conditions, and mitigating disability-based bullying. Melissa has worked as the executive director for several disability-related nonprofits, including the Center for Independent Living, since 2017. She has been utilizing her expertise in ADA and other disability laws and disability policy to ensure that people with disabilities have equal access to disability-related programs, services before, during, and after disasters and emergencies. Melissa has a book written called I Can't Swim, but I Haven't Drowned Yet. Notes from a disability rights activist. And also persuading organizations and individuals to be more comfortable with people with disabilities. That's by the People with Disabilities Press, 2003. All right, with that, I am handing this over to these two, and this one's going to be a little bit scratchy, so if you raise your hand, I'll be running over to you to take the mic.
Hello, everyone, and hello to the people joining us virtually. I'm so glad to be here today. There's a slide on the screen, and it says the independent living movement and systems tied to emergencies and disasters. Then it has the websites for Atlantis and the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies. It says atlantiscommunity.org, then disasterstrategies.org. And above the text are, we're not done. I'll let you know. Above the text are the, sorry about that. Above the text of the Partnerships Atlantis' logo. The Partnerships logo is a sun with 4 icons, within it representing the hurricane and the thunderstorm cloud, a home with a split down the middle, and a tornado. The words, the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies, sit between the center of the sun and the sun's rays. The Atlantis logo is a rainbow above a black stick figure in a wheelchair. The figure is holding their hands above their head with a chain breaking free to the wrist. Text sits below the icon and reads Atlantis Community Inc. The partnership and Atlantis websites, as I said, are at the bottom of the page. Thank you again for being here today. I want to share with you, this is of thousands of presentations I have probably done in my life. This is the first one I have done in person since the COVID-19 pandemic, and I am so excited to be here. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you for having us here. And also, I am a woman, an older woman, it always pains me to say that, with longish COVID gray hair, and I'm wearing a black and white jacket, and I use she, her pronouns. And now Kurt is going to introduce himself.
I am Kurt Garrett, and I am the Disaster Preparedness Coordinator for Atlantis. Just to describe myself a little bit, I am a older, I won't say old yet, but older, little graying hair. I'm wearing a brown jacket, black pants, blue shirt. And the thing I always hate to admit is a growing forehead. So my hair is starting to go after all these years, but I'm really excited to be able to talk today. My passion the last few years has been Atlantis. Oh, my pronouns. I'm sorry. I always forget my pronouns. My pronouns are he, him, his. So, and I identify as a person, a disabled person. So, I apologize for that. But a little bit about Atlantis, just to begin. Atlantis is a disability-led center for independent living, serving, and I always have to do this in alphabetical order, so I don't forget one: Adams, Arapahoe, Clear Creek, Denver, Douglas, Elbert, and Jefferson counties. So just around the Denver metro area. Our mission is to advocate for people with disabilities to be a meaningful part of an integrated community of their choice. And I put heavy emphasis on choice. We'll listen a little bit about the partnership.
Yes, the partnership. And at the bottom of the slide, the partnership, some logo with the words the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies to the right of the sun appears. The Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies is the only US-led, disability-led, or only US disability-led organization with a focused mission on equity for people with disabilities and people with access and functional needs throughout all planning, programs, services, and procedures before, during, and after disasters and emergencies. And as you just learned from June, disasters and emergencies are different things, if you didn't know that already. Next, please. So disclaimer. The material, because a lawyer does live inside of me, as I said, I practiced law for I think all of 6 hours, but a lawyer does live inside of me. Material presented doesn't constitute legal advice, is for informational purposes only. If you're seeking legal advice, please contact a qualified attorney. Thank you. Next, please. Now, we can talk about some ground rules. First of all, maintain confidentiality. Don't give specifics. Don't give specific situations. Don't give specific people. Don't give specific names. We all know that. Or we do broader situations. Ask questions. If you have a question, raise your hand, signal, let us know virtually that you have a question. Please tell us what your question is. It won't distract me. And have fun. Now, normally when I'm in person, I give virtual fabulous prizes. But I give physical fabulous prizes, little toys you might get at a kid's birthday party. But because we have a virtual audience and also because of questionable hygiene around passing things to people, we're not doing actual fabulous prizes. You might get a virtual fabulous prize. So ask questions. Prizes go to people that answer questions, not necessarily correctly, or people that raise their hand. Next, please. The objectives are for today is we hope you get a better understanding of disability rights movement basics, if you don't know that already. We want you to understand what a Center for Independent Living, or CIL is, and the roles CILs can play in emergency management, ways to make emergency management inclusive of disabled people, and that there are legal obligations to provide accessible emergency programs and services. Next, please. Couple quick words about language really briefly. We ask people to refer to people with disabilities or disabled people. So people prefer identity first, so they can prefer people first, but we would like you to avoid, and keep in mind, avoiding language that presupposes the negative. Victim of. My favorite cartoon is someone who's a standing person run over by a wheelchair with tracks in their back. And there's often the sunset of a power wheelchair user. That person is a wheelchair victim. My family members are wheelchair victims when I run over them frequently. I am not a victim of my wheelchair, though I have run over my toes a couple times. Suffering from. We're not suffering. We're not suffering from our disabilities. Sometimes we suffer from our disabilities. Next, please.
Can I throw one in there?
Please.
So my big pet peeve is wheelchair bound. Nobody's bound to a wheelchair. Wheelchair should be celebrated because it is a tool of independence. So next time you hear that, the news is infamous for using that, try to elicit emotions. So just remember that, please.
And sometimes, as we were saying earlier, when Susan says someone's homebound, we mean they need transportation. So avoid language that groups people. The mentally ill. Mentally ill is not a great phrase anyway, but the mentally ill, the disabled. Now, here's the reason I put the language slides on. The AFNs. We have an AFN over here. How many AFNs do you have? Some people with disabilities have access and functional needs. People are not access and functional needs, and we're not AFNs. So I'm going to ask you all to watch that throughout the rest of the week and throughout the rest of your career and the rest of your lives. I'm not an AFN. Sometimes I have AFNs. Okay. And I think we didn't like special needs because of all the negative baggage that brought with it. But sometimes I hear going from, we have a special needs person over here to we have an AFN. It's kind of just switch. So people with access and functional needs. Next, please.
And now we get to talk about the disability rights movement a little bit. I'm going to begin. We're going to start with a video. We'll probably need some help back there, Tim, to get this to play. But Ed Roberts is considered really the father of the disabled rights movement and the independent living movement. So just a little quick video about him.
Tim?
Yep.
You need to share your. You might need to stop presenting.
That awkward moment. We've all been there, right? And done this, running one of these, and
I have a recorded version of the Jeopardy song that I play sometimes during trainings while people are thinking about the questions to kind of fill the silence. And I'm trying my best to speak slowly.
Here we go.
But I talk fast from someone from the Northeast.
All of us in the family at one.
How
like personal assistants, but
all of us in the family at one time got something that made us a little sick, but not the way it hit Ed. Ed was just 14 and just taken a spurt of growth. He just shot up. But there it was, polio. They took him off to the hospital and he walked in, and 3 days later he was in an iron lung. And he did survive the horrendous fever that goes with it. We stayed with him until early morning, and I heard his voice coming down the hall. "Why are my parents still here?" he was saying. I thought, well, he seems to have his brain intact.
the doctor said, well, maybe you should hope he dies. Because if he lives, he'll be nothing more than a vegetable for the rest of his life. Now, I don't know how many of you had that happen to you, but I'm proud as hell that he did it. Why didn't you?
In 1963, at the age of 24, Ed Roberts became the first severely disabled student to attend the University of California, Berkeley, and helped to create the Physically Disabled Students Program.
There are very few people, even with the most severe disabilities, who can't take control of their own life. The problem is that people around us don't expect us to. The most important part of that is working with other people, moving away from your own problems to help somebody else. And that liberated me. When I realized I could help others, it made me a lot freer to help myself.
After graduating, Ed joined the Berkeley CIL and became its executive director in 1974, turning the organization into a model for a new kind of disability advocacy.
We have to show our society that disability doesn't affect work. If you're motivated to work, no matter how disabled, you can do a good job. Might need a little technology, you might need a little help, like personal assistance, but you can do the job. And our number one issue is still old attitudes towards us. And those old attitudes see us as helpless and unable. And disability can make you very
We could cut that off a little bit, but again, my favorite quote by him is, if I am a vegetable, I am an artichoke, a little prickly on the outside, but nice, soft and gooey on the inside. So, I appreciate that. And moving on to something more local, if you all are aware of, the series of Rocky Mountain TBF videos about great pieces of history in Colorado. This is just a little segment about it. And it really is the explanation of how Atlantis was started. Atlantis was one of the first couple centers for independent living in the country.
And you'll see people around a bus throughout the video, and people doing demonstrations. And in the past video, the woman speaking was Zona Roberts, Ed Roberts' mother. Sorry.
Thank you. Go ahead, Tim.
This was like a silent revolution. This was like a silent revolution.
Colorado is so often really at the center of national trends.
Colorado was the center of the disability rights movement in the 1970s and 80s. With the founding of ADAPT, a new era of activism among people with disabilities.
It became a national movement. Its heartbeat was coming from Denver.
Armed with the promise of equal access and the right leadership at the right time, 19 brave individuals inspired the nation. It was a long and challenging battle, blessed with the perfect mix of civil disobedience, the lens of the media, legal action, and passionate individuals whose lives depended on it.
The Gang of 19 are a group of young people that grew up in a Denver nursing home.
The protests in Denver were the beginning of a new era. Denver became one of the first cities to have accessible mass transit.
And I don't know of any movement that was so insistent on winning.
Having their rights acknowledged and their abilities, rather than just their disability, was very important.
And so the ADA was passed to end a protest that began with the Gang of 19.
So the Gang 19, it's really neat. In my office, we have all the pictures all over the wall. So I know why I do my job, and I think that's something that I would recommend that everybody know your why. The one story I always have to tell is there an individual was part of the Gang of 19. His name was Larry Ruiz, nonverbal, power chair user, but his big quote was, just remember, always chain yourself to the front of the bus. Great quote. But anyway. And try to move on one, Tim. The clicker's not working here. Oh, there we go. So anyway, Wade Blank, if you get on Rocky Mountain PBS, it's like a whole 30 minutes. Wade Blank is the model for neighborhood or community organizing, just the way he did things back then. He's from Ohio, came to Denver, again, working in a nursing home, was actually in Lakewood, right on the border of Lakewood, Denver. He worked with the youth wing unit, and it was actually fired because he recommended that the nursing home start some kind of independent living program. So, but just to reemphasize, all the folks from the original Gang of 19 in Atlantis came from a nursing home and were able to move into a center to a low-income housing area in Denver.
And you have a black and white photograph, and it's a man with shoulder length light hair standing with glasses, a woman in a wheelchair, some people using wheelchairs in the background, a person standing wearing a helmet, and a group of people standing in the back. And the photo credit is for the Denver Post.
And so Atlantis was created. Wade Blank moved the adults from the nursing home institution into their own homes. This was the genesis of Atlantis, and Atlantis incorporated in 1975. And in the picture, it's this building doesn't exist anymore. We now, as of a year and a half ago, are in the ground level of a apartment building called the Atlantis Apartments. That is inclusive apartment building in Denver off of Alameda and Broadway. But the building here, there's some trees in the front, the building behind it with our logo with the rainbow, but with an actual rainbow in the sky behind the building. So I think we'll be keeping that picture for a while. Questions right off about what I've covered? Any related to Denver, what happened to Denver? Anything online there, virtual? No questions? I could talk about this forever. Denver became one of the first couple cities in the United States to have a fully accessible mass transit district. The reason they protested is because RTD said, we're not going to do it. We're going to like one bus. So the other thing that people don't realize, after this too, RTD went from a good old boys appointed board to we all here in Colorado elect, or in the metro area, elect the people who run RTD. So Centers for Independent Living, a little bit about what we do. First of all, just to show of hands, how many people know what a Center for Independent Living or have actually ever known anybody that was in there, or know what we do? Okay, that's pretty good. Usually when I'm in a room, I did a CERT group in Lakewood, and it was nobody in the room. That's usually what we get. I think most folks do not have a clue. What is CERT? CERT. Oh, I'm sorry. I mentioned CERT. See, I forget. CERT, Community Emergency Response Training. I did that. City of Lakewood has a group. But this picture is of folks that are consumers and people that worked at Atlantis. There's a young woman in a wheelchair, several other people up sitting, and another woman up front with glasses, and a bunch of people behind them. Looks like they're enjoying time there. Our mission at Atlantis is to advocate for all people with disabilities to be a meaningful part of an integrated community of their choice. Our philosophy, people with disabilities should have as much to say in and control over their lives as their non-disabled peers. To that end, independent living is dedicated to providing individuals with disabilities the skills and support to achieve what others take for granted. Independent living means that you get to choose what you do, where you go, what you eat, and what help and healthcare you receive. It means that your informed consent is most important when it comes to your care and your life. So self-consent and choice. We have 5 core services that we have: advocacy. We advocate the systems and the individual level to promote positive change for the disability community. The next one, informational referral. We provide resources to individuals and the community on subjects related to living independently with all types of disabilities. We also refer to individuals to other community partners that can assist them in increasing independence. The third is peer support. We coordinate peer support groups where peer mentors with disabilities serve as role models to other people with disabilities. The peer support groups provide moral support and creative solutions for a variety of life situations. The peer mentor program includes formal group settings, as well as individual peer mentoring by the staff members and consumers who have disabilities. The next one is independent living skills. Our trained staff assist individuals in their quest for independence by providing tools in order to gain their independence. This includes performing basic tasks that lead to independence, such as cooking, accessing public transportation, budgeting, resume writing, application assistance, employee readiness, and right now about 90% of what we do is help people find accessible, affordable housing. Just in the metro area, you qualify for low-income housing. It's a minimum of a year before you can get that. Most low-income, so folks know, most low-income housing, there's regulations that only 10% of those are accessible. I find that rather off, considering we're up to what, 33% of the population in America have disabilities. So we are advocating for that to change. And then last, transitions. We assist people, who live in nursing homes into independent living. And then we also have a youth transition program. So kids that are getting ready to leave school and go to the next step in their lives. And that's, emergency transitions is a program that we used during COVID with some COVID care funding. We did a partnership with the Reciprocity Collective, Colorado Cross Disability Coalition, ADAPT, Rocky Mountain Human Services, Colorado Division of Housing, and Sage Hospitality. And just a really quick, what that was help people get out of nursing homes in a quicker process, because it's not just a real easy process to get them out of, congregate settings where people were literally dying, and, catching COVID and dying quite frequently. So we moved them into hotels, and there was some of these other organizations that were actually provided personal needs care and services at the hotel. And they used folks that were actually experiencing homelessness as the people that assisted with that. So, questions? Anything about independent living centers? Not every independent living center is the same. Atlantis does these 5 core areas. I'd like to say we're more in the advocacy end, and then teaching individuals how to find the information to be able to make the choices to live independently in their lives. There are the other centers that have direct care services, and things like in-home care or ASL interpreters, American Sign Language interpreters, those types of things. Atlantis does not. One of our big challenges is budget. We are very limited. We get our money from the feds and grants. So that's very much our big challenge. So we'll talk about that more. Billy here is with another Center for Independent Living. We're gonna do a roundtable discussion tomorrow, and we'll be able to talk about a lot more of those challenges.
It's all right. Is this a good breaking point? Because we do have snacks here, and it's been a little while that we've been going. Would it be all right if we pause right here, or should we wait to another section?
I think good, because we're gonna do partnership next.
Oh, good, awesome. Well, go ahead. One question in the chat.
Answer that first.
Alrighty,
Awesome, thank you. This is Tim, and this is coming from Daryl Schaefer to both Curtis and Melissa. How do you deal with potential unrealistic expectations by some individuals with disabilities? An example, someone may want to live independently, but the realization of their abilities may preclude that.
This is Melissa. Do you want me to jump in, Kurt, or do you want? Yeah, and feel free, we can both jump in. I'm just kind of chomping at the bit. People can live a whole lot more independently than our society thinks. We have beliefs around certain people, certain disabilities. Well, everybody knows they can't because of X. And when you know someone who can't live independently because of X, I can tell you why a person who does that I've met in my travels, like real people. I never make up examples. I think it's really important that we start seeing what someone needs to live independently and kind of step away, look at what their needs are and get creative about how those needs can be accomplished. Because if someone's articulating the fact that they want to live independently, guess what? They can live independently. And I think about with people with cognitive disabilities who have children. Everyone says they can't have children, we should take their babies away. I think about people, one of my bosses, the president of the Center for Independent Living, was someone who used a stretcher and didn't sit. He's also a pastor of his own church and he had 2 kids and a wife. You know, everyone knew he couldn't live independently. There's lots of people. I don't think we need to manage people's expectations around living independently. I think we need to expect more of our society. Because it used to be said that people with disabilities couldn't work. Well, why not? Well, there's no accessible transportation. Well, we fix the transportation. The building's not accessible. We make the building accessible. We don't get into college. We made it so we got the education, we do all of those things. And you think about what is missing and how can I bridge this gap and how can someone live as independently as they want to. Kurt, what would you like to add?
And I'd just like to say is that I would want to ask this person specifically why they think they couldn't live independently. Because it is the constraints and the concept of I can't that society has created. You know, we all think we're going to get old and go in a nursing home, but we have to do that. That's a bunch of BS. You know, it's in you have that picture because society has trained you over and over and over again that the message they send out that you're lesser than, that you can't do these things. Well, I'll tell you, you know, if I would have, I worked a career at Parks and Rec where everybody told me I would never be able to work in that field. And I did it for pretty much 30 years. I work in emergency management. How many people with disabilities do you see in emergency management? It's only because society had that misconception that we couldn't do that you're fighting. It's the individual's misconception a lot of times that they can't. I mean, you saw Ed, he has lung problems, you know, he pretty much uses his mouth, right? A blow.
He was doing something called frog breathing, where you inhale and hold it a certain amount of time, and yes.
But he, you know, didn't really use his hands, even use his wheelchair. So I really don't think, I think anybody can live independently. So does the person ask him if that answers their question?
All right.
And I just want to give the person who asked that question a virtual silver Lamborghini. It's a Matchbox one, but you get a silver Lamborghini. So thank you, Gal, for asking that question.
I love the prizes you give out there. Melissa, this is Sadie. All right, we're going to do it's an awkward break. However, we'll come back and we'll start talking about the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies. But we do have snacks out here, and it is fruits and yogurt, and trying to make sure we meet everybody's dietary requests. That it is right outside. If you're, oh goodness, it'll be on your right if you go out these doors where it says exit, and then we're going to do about 20 minutes. So if you'll be back, or I'm sorry, about 15 minutes. If you could come back by 2:28 p.m. Mountain Time. You know, I'm not about starting on all these normal times, right? All right, so 2:28 Mountain, and then again, it's right outside here, and grab something.
Water would be great.
Test, test, test. I need Spanish interpreters to give us a thumbs up if you're hearing us. All right. Spanish interpreters.
Yeah.
Spanish interpreters.
I've got a thumbs up.
Already. I'm not sure where we're glitching there. But we're all good to go now on Spanish interpreting? Are we getting a thumbs up?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up, alrighty. All right, everyone, welcome back. Well, we still have 2 more minutes, so all I had to do is a check, but if, please keep enjoying that and then we'll resume.
Well, welcome back, everybody, eating. Now we're gonna get sleepy, right? No? No, we're not getting to see, this will energize you. It's good energy food, right? I have to also tell you that this is like I think my second, I did the Lakewood Community Emergency Response Training. I did a presentation to them a couple weeks ago, but previous to all of this, I was used to elementary age kids doing stuff. So if I fall back into that, I apologize, you know, if I ask you to do something, you know, and if we have behavior issues, we'll deal with that too. So, you know. Anyway, Kim, I believe my clicker, no, it works again. What do you know? So next roles is, we're going to cut to the chase here. So what can independent living centers do during to help emergency management? So Atlantis has supported folks. You know, our big response was again to the COVID, the pandemic. When I came on, that was probably 99% of what I did for a year. So we had all kinds of different projects working with different community partners. One of the exciting things that I've done in the last year is really, and a lot of it has to do with Sadie and her team, is our connections with organizations. So my big goal is to connect with all of the 7 counties. I have a lot of people, because I work for the city of Denver. I know the person that is the mass care person, and they have actually asked Atlantis to be a partner, a community partner, if they open the DOC, which is basically the Departmental Operations Center. They have a separate one from the command center that is downtown with all the different branches of city government, that they realized during COVID that there were way too many people, and I see some shaking heads, crammed in this little space. You know, I don't know how many people are in there, but quite a few. So anyway, Gary Freeman's his name, has asked us to be a partner in that. That's one of our big pieces. I also, you know, any collaborative, the state, Sadie's office is great. But we're willing and able to partner in a lot of different ways, just knowing that we have some financial challenges to that. And again, we can discuss that more tomorrow when Billy and I are actually doing a workshop based around a lot of this. So, you know, I think the biggest piece of information we can provide is lived experience. My one story I like to tell is, I tell my coworkers coming to these meetings, you know, a lot of times we're planning for those people over there, you know, those people over there, the people that speak Spanish, those people over there, the deaf people, those people, that use wheelchairs. Well, being a person with a disability, to be able, like, I attended the Colorado Emergency Management Conference a few weeks ago, and my big payback for me, the empowerment, is that I go from one of those people over there to we. And it really does make a difference in conversations. You know, people with disabilities are the most underrepresented by the people that make decisions for them. That's the medical field is probably the worst. It's that way in education, it's that way everything. Atlantis, our regulations say that 55% of our, or 51% of our staff, our board of directors, our administration have to have disabilities. We actually are more like somewhere between 70 and 80% at Atlantis. So that lived experience piece, you know, is really, really huge. Stakeholders, yep. So see if I can get this to move. There we go. On to ESF.
Thank you.
It helps if I unmuted. Thank you, everybody. Welcome back. Emergency support functions, or ESFs, we have in parentheses. Emergency support functions, or ESFs, are common types of emergency assistance that are likely to be requested from the state. There's 15 federal ESFs, and states may have slightly different ESFs. Colorado is really close to being the same, but just know that they vary. And just so you can know that ESFs are common types of assistance that have been grouped functionally into 15 areas. State departments have been assigned responsibilities for implementing these functions, and assignments are made based upon the department's statutory, programmatic, regulatory authorities or responsibilities. Next, please. And a schedule list of the ESFs. If you're sitting there thinking, I can never remember these, how many people don't know about ESFs? How many people are unfamiliar with ESFs? Okay, for all of you, if you're unfamiliar with this going, I can never learn this, this makes no sense. You'll figure it out. It just takes a little bit of time to hang with the emergency support function language. It's all graspable. It took me a while to get it in the beginning and kind of had to jump in there. ESF 1 is transportation. ESF 2 is communications. ESF 3 is public works and engineering. ESF 4 is firefighting. ESF 5 is information and planning. And ESF 6 is mass care, emergency assistance, temporary housing and human services. ESF 6 is something you'll talk about a lot in emergency management. ESF 7 is logistics. ESF 8 is public health and medical services. ESF 8 is also key. ESF 6 and ESF 8 are also key. Next, please. And we have the rest of them. ESF 9 is search and rescue. ESF 10, oil and hazardous materials response. ESF 11, agriculture and natural resources annex. ESF 12, I'm sorry, energy. ESF 13, safety and public safety and security. ESF 14 is cross-sector and business infrastructure. And ESF 15 is external affairs. Now, you might be wondering why I went through all of those emergency support functions. Next slide, please. Gaps in emergency support functions, sorry. Emergency management is not inherently inclusive of the rights of people with rights and needs of people with disabilities. So you have all these emergency support functions. You would think they would cover everything. There are gaps, there are huge gaps that are covered under nothing. Notoriously ESF 6, which talks about mass care and other things like that, and ESF 8, which I think was more medical kinds of things, services, don't communicate with each other. What happens when those two places don't communicate with each other? People with disabilities end up in institutions. We end up sicker, we end up dying, we end up having bad things happen to each other when the ESFs don't communicate. And the gap can, go ahead, that's fine. So where the centers can help, you go, what does this got to do with the Center for Independent Living and how can centers help? And what are those ESF things? I'm really never going to get this. Where SILS can provide support is in ESF 1 for transportation. Maybe you got a van, maybe you know what is accessible transportation. Maybe you can do a contract ahead of time, like June said before. Maybe you do a contract ahead of time with the SILS. Communication, information and planning, and ESF 6, mass care, emergency assistance, temporary housing and human services, and ESF public health and medical services. Independent living centers can take a role in all of those areas. And that's just something to think about if you're a center for independent living, how you can get your center to be able to do that. And if you're in emergency management, thinking about how you can collaborate with and utilize the centers for independent living. Next, please. Questions and comments? We still have fabulous prizes available. Yes, and a microphone we'll be hearing shortly.
Hi there, my name is Allison. Thank you for this. I'm new to ESF world, but I do know about EOC or Emergency Operations Center, and I'm just wondering if you can, if you'll get to at some point or maybe now, let us know how EOC falls into this, because in the EOC, some of those ESFs are represented, and just was wondering about that.
Right, and what's your question specifically?
So how does ESF play into EOC? Is this sort of, are they part of the same?
They are the emergency operations. The emergency operations centers are providing support services. And Jim, jump in anytime you want here, are providing support services. And one of the things we're trying to do as advocates for disability rights is make sure that what the EOC offers is accessible to people with disabilities, and what the ESFs, what people offer through ESFs are accessible. So I might do something through an EOC that's actually part of the ESF emergency support function. Does that make sense? We can talk more about it later tomorrow, and tomorrow we'll be talking about it more. Wednesday, Thursday, whatever. The day after tomorrow, I'll be talking about it more. You'll be hearing more about it.
Right, and those EOCs, emergency operations centers, have representatives from what, like the fire department, from hospitals, all the different departments, Parks and Rec. Well, my easy answer is those relationships need to be built within each of those departments with Centers for Independent Living as a resource. You know, that's something I work on, that I'm trying to work towards. So does that help? Yeah. Hold on. As I sprint across. Okay.
As a local emergency manager, I guess my perspective would be that at the local level, the update to NIMS, to the National Incident Management System, gave us more options that we were already doing in a lot of cases where we're not necessarily following the federal ESF model. For a long time, we tried to make it fit at the local level, but departmentally, it doesn't always fit. So some of us have more of a hybrid model. We use a departmental model that matches our local government structure, and then also has a seat at the table for community organizations who are already serving the community. They really become the subject matter experts for us, whether that's a transportation provider or area agency on aging or Center for Disabilities. They become part of our EOC ideally. And that structure is determined locally. It's not necessarily dictated by the federal system. I just want to make that clear.
Yes, absolutely. And like I said before, the states can have different ESFs and absolutely done on a local level. So thank you for bringing that point up. You get a rainbow colored Super Bowl, a little miniature one. That's your fabulous prize. Okay, where's our virtual question, please?
Yes.
All right, this is Tim, and we have a couple of questions. The first one coming from Charlotte Stasio. Are there international frameworks for ESF or emergency support function like functions we can look into? As I find it to be a sort of inside baseball or just that really limited use within an organization that can be really hard to understand for non-emergency managers.
This is Melissa. And in terms of the international framework, the first thing when we say global and international, I think of the Sendai framework, which is how to get people with disabilities treated equally during disasters, but that's got its own jargon and that attached to it as well. But read the Sendai framework, which is a 30-year plan, and they have 7 years left by 2030. Things are supposed to be in disaster response globally, a lot more accessible, and it lays out that entire framework, if that makes sense.
Awesome. And then we have another question coming from Daryl Schaefer, which he actually has his hand raised, so he can feel free to unmute.
Hi, Daryl.
Hello, thank you. I have a
little multicolored top. Go ahead, Daryl, sorry.
No problem. And thank you for the Lamborghini. I'm already driving it here.
You're welcome.
I wanted to just make the mention, and it was mentioned briefly, the ESF, the NIMS, National Incident Management System, ICS, Incident Command System. These are all, as was said, recommendations, suggestions, frameworks. They're not mandates. And that's a key component. They work very well for situations that will work. But in some cases, maybe you don't need a transportation, or maybe you don't need a housing based on your disaster. So you don't necessarily have to implement every single one of them every single time. And this is where it gets back to the emergency managers working with the community beforehand to make those relationships to say, in our plan, we will be using city buses to evacuate people. Well, great, if we need to evacuate people, but if we don't, then we're not going to use the transportation aspect. But that's also where within the disability community and the independent living community, especially, if you have a location that has a lot of people in wheelchairs and they say, we're going to use the city buses, you have 30 people there, great, we'll send you one bus because one bus can handle 30 people. Not realizing there's only 2 wheelchair spots in that bus. They'll need 15 vehicles. This is the relationship and the understanding between the emergency manager and all your community elements within each ESF to make sure that we're both on the same page before your event actually occurs.
This is Melissa and Daryl. I really want, I'm turning my back on you virtually now so I can face the audience. So I feel like I'm being rude to you. But thank you for saying that. In case it wasn't clear, you don't use every ESF every single time. It depends on the disaster. And the key is about having a relationship between emergency management and the disability community. Because the disability community is going to know there's 2 accessible spaces on a bus. The emergency management community might not. There's other things that the emergency management community will know that the disability community doesn't. So thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate it. Enjoy your car.
And thanks, Daryl. We're actually, to go along with your Lamborghini, I'm gonna assume that it's electric Lamborghini, and we have an accessible charging space because in Denver passed a code recently, right? Making a requirement for parking lots that have those to have minimum numbers of those. So anyway, so you're set. Cool.
When I make it to Denver, I will look for them. Thanks.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Me. So make emergency management more inclusive.
We're going to talk about ways to do that.
Yeah.
Thanks. Next, please. Sorry about that.
There you go. Sorry.
So how do we make emergency management more inclusive as people with disabilities, as emergency managers? Emergency management, like I said before, isn't inherently inclusive of the rights and needs of people with disabilities. That's not because anyone's bad. It's not because anyone gets up in the morning, rubs their hands together and says, I'm going to exclude people with disabilities today. It's unconscious. It's something that we haven't, it's something that gets overlooked sometimes. That gets overlooked a lot of the time, actually. And exclusion is magnified when people with multiple marginalized identities, also known as intersectional identities. Next, please. And let's look at some people with social identities that are pushed to the margins, who tend to be forgotten about or actively excluded. People in the United States are marginalized due to their disability, race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, income, education level, language, family heritage, place of origin, religion, or political affiliation, to name a few marginalized identities. Next, please. So what is intersectionality? How many people are familiar with the concept of intersectionality? So a few people are, most people probably are. Intersectionality is a framework to analyze the interlocking effects people with multiple marginalized identities experience. Black, Indigenous, people of color, in parentheses, BIPOC, BIPOC, and other multiply marginalized people with disabilities experience disproportionate bias, ableism, and discrimination. Next, please. We want to make sure that disabled people, including disabled people with multiple marginalized identities, are involved in meaningful ways in all aspects of planning, not just at the end, all aspects of planning, a little bit, response, and recovery. Next, please. So you want to you don't want to think about someone just at the end. You want to think about them throughout. Yes, please. We have a question. We have a question here. Sure, a mic need here.
Cheryl is asking, do you get involved with disaster exercises?
Yes, well, okay. The Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies, personally, we get as an organization, gets involved with exercises. We also do continuity of operations planning for all kinds of organizations, including Centers for Independent Living and gap analysis. So we can touch base after this.
I was going to say Atlantis. We've had a couple exercises we've been asked to be part of.
Are you guys from Colorado? Oh, talk to Atlantis. Sorry. Never mind. Okay, so things to make emergency management inclusive. Invite people with disability to your table if you're in emergency management. Connect with local disability leaders with experience and interest in emergency management. Add disability-led organizations and disability leaders to distribution lists. So that might be a Center for Independent Living. That's the most obvious because it's cross disability. It also might be a disability-led, disability-specific organization like National Organization of the Deaf, National Council of the Blind, National Federation for the Blind. Those disability-specific organizations, but they need to be disability-led, and that's really, really critical. Next,
Can I
please.
throw that in?
Please.
There's lots of organizations say they represent folks with disabilities, but they are not necessarily disability-led. We understand what disability-led is. It's actually people with disabilities are making the decisions at that and are the leaders at that organization, because there are a lot. And it's fine line parents, I used to work with kids, but there's some educating on it that parents need too. So parent-led, it's good to listen to them and they may have some valuable information, but make sure you're checking with the organizations that are run by people with disabilities too.
Absolutely, positively. Thank you so much, Kurt. Next, please. And for people with disabilities, okay. That was one, okay. Asked to be invited to the tables of disability-led organizations. Get invited to their party if you're in emergency management. Attend meetings and events of disability-led organizations and request to be added to their distribution list. Next, please. Meetings, events, exercise, and communications need to be accessible. You need to meet ADA and 504 legal obligations, including conducting meetings in events and ADA compliant venues, providing sign language interpreters, captioning videos. Next, please. Having material in accessible formats, written material in accessible formats. You want to practice inclusivity by having sign language interpreters or videos. That's not legally required to have sign language interpreters on videos unless they're emergency related, but it's an important practice. Addressing conscious and unconscious disability bias by providing continuous training by experienced disabled people and modeling bias awareness and mitigation strategies. You don't want to say, oh, my Uncle Fred uses a wheelchair, so I think I'll have him come and talk about what it's like to have a disability. You want people to talk about bias and all of those kinds of things. So think about those kinds of things. I require people to go through bias training. I'll throw in bias, when they're doing legal training, I require them to go through bias training usually because that helps them. Quick questions and comments, and I want to go to another section real quickly. Any comments virtually? Okay, yeah. You want to hold your questions till the end, that'd be great. Okay, so next slide, please. Legal obligations. Told you there's a lawyer that lives inside me and she really likes the ADA and disability rights law. The laws of emergency management have obligations under the people with disabilities include the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, the Rehabilitation Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. Next, please. Under the ADA and Section 504 of the Rehab Act, where any federal funds are provided under the Rehab Act. We need federal funds for the Rehab Act, not for ADA. Emergency management must not discriminate against people with disabilities. And the goal and your objectives, you remember, is to get you aware that there are disability rights law. This is not a legal training. Left to my own devices, I would talk to you for 5 days and have. So 3 is a short one. So just know that. Next, please. So legal obligations include providing equally effective communication to people with speech, visual, and hearing disabilities. And you might need to do that by providing sign language interpreters. Print and electronic materials need to be in accessible format. Having events in structurally compliant venues, structurally accessible venues. Allowing service ends. Making modifications to policies and practices. And remember not to charge for any accommodations. Next, please. Services must be provided in the most integrated setting appropriate to the needs of the person with a disability. That's from the Olmstead decision. Who knows about the Olmstead decision? The Olmstead was a case that said people have a right to get services in the community if that's what they want, if it's the most appropriate setting to meet their needs, which it is most of the time. And it's a Supreme Court case ruling on the ADA, interpreting the ADA. People with disabilities shouldn't be institutionalized to providers' convenience. And that's what happens a lot of times in disasters. And it's really important to understand that and to know that, to know about that we end up institutionalized. And there's a link to a paper called Preserving Our Freedom. It was published by the National Council on Disability, and National Council on Disability contracts with authors to write the grant. And Marcy Roth and myself, with the partnership, a contractor with to write that proposal. And it talks about what happens and how we end up in institutions disproportionately during disasters and how horrific that is. And the bad news is it hasn't changed since 2018. It's gotten worse. Next, please. Questions. Any questions? Any questions virtually?
It's really more, not a question, it's a comment, especially for anybody here from county. So Lonnie with the American Red Cross, I was in Hurricane Ian, and one of the shelters that got opened by the county, not Red Cross managed, where we had about 500 people, various disabilities and so on, whose basic human rights and disability rights were not being met. And the Center for Independent Living, we brought them in to help the county better understand, as well as the subcontractor that was brought in to manage that shelter, understand that not having accessible showers, not having accessible bathrooms were not being met. And the Center for Independent Living there in Lee County were really amazing to work with. And they really advocated for the people there in that shelter.
Centers are often untapped resources, and you want to tap on the resources of the centers and know what we are, what we do.
Any questions online?
And it's a hand raise.
And all right, did you need to say something first, Kurt?
Make you run. No, she need to work off all that stress, right? Get all those bad chemicals going. So from this stressful week. Anyway, community connectors, and I didn't really mention that, the Centers for Independent Living are great community connectors. We connect the dots, introduce people, and when you attend Billy's and I roundtable, we will talk about some specific examples. So.
All right, this is Tim. Please feel free to go ahead, Daryl.
Thank you, Curtis and Melissa. It's been a great presentation. And Melissa, you did touch on a few items, which I do want to clarify just very slightly. I've done a bit of research on this, on the ADA and how it applies to disasters. And what you're saying, for a lot of it, the planning and recovery efforts are gaining more they're gaining more abilities in complying with the ADA, which is wonderful. The challenge that I did some research on is what happens during that finite time of the response, the actual time right after the earthquake when the firefighters are trying to get in there and do something and extricate people. And what I found, the ADA laws are not suspended. However, decisions by the firefighters and the emergency managers are based on the conditions at hand, which may preclude reasonable accommodations. To use a very simple example, there's no wheelchair lift on a helicopter. It's not part of the design, but the helicopter is only for an immediate rescue in that situation. So we try, from a rescuer perspective, we will try to make every reasonable accommodation, but at the same time, the rescuers are there to rescue as many people, save as many lives as possible. And a very, very dangerous decision is I can rescue 20 people in a half hour, or I can rescue one person in a half hour because it's going to take 20 people to rescue that one person. That is a very dangerous decision, and no law has been put in place in any state to say you should or should not do that.
This is Melissa, and thank you for your insightful comments, Daryl. And a couple of things, actually many things. I could go on for about a half an hour now, so I won't do that because I think I got 2 minutes. First of all, if the building's burning, it's okay to pick me up and get me out. And I think we all understand that that's okay. And secondly, you don't address that gap by planning, but the better you have planned and thought it through ahead of time, the better chances will be. So it's having the exercises It's having, it's doing the gap analysis, it's looking at all of those things and exercising. Not that I physically exercise, but doing exercises and break things, and that's where you think things are broken. I think it's really, I'm getting the hook here, but I think it's really difficult when you say one person versus 20, because when you're always the one person whose life is invaluable, that's really difficult. And I just want to leave on that. So just for something for us to think about. I'm not saying prioritize 20 people over one person, but when I'm always that one person that won't get rescued, that's really difficult.
Yes, it is.
Thank you so much. And I think that's a great way to close, and thank you so much.
I was just gonna say, in the gap analysis, Sadie's office can help you with that, right? Yeah.
Yes, we have lots of tools.
No, I just could say my other part of my responsibility, I think, is to educate and inform our consumers, refer to them as consumers because consumers make choices, is to train them on, preparedness. And I came, and I didn't, if you have a disability or not, that I came from the school of, you better plan on nobody coming to get you, and you better prepare for that.
Yeah.
So being able for, to do educational pieces through centers for independent living is a great opportunity.
We have one final comment over here from our FEMA partner.
Hey, this is Mike Houston. I wanted to follow up with what Dale stated about saving 20 of saving 1. When I was on the National IMAT headquarters, part of our incident management level 1 was there's a incendiary nuclear device that went off in the capital region, and we needed to evacuate people from the nuclear plume, right? And so there's no time. So I get what Dale's saying about saving 20, but what we talked about, and the same thing I was faced with the IMAT team, how are we going to evacuate? We don't know what's going to come across, but you need to have the capability to evacuate. So what we ended up talking about is you can evacuate 20 people. You can take an individual that has a variety of resources that they need for independence, but what's lacking is the communication from point A to point B, where they're being delivered to. If there was good coordination amongst emergency management and all the mission assignments and so forth, they would already have resources temporarily at the receiving site to then manage that, right? And then help that. So they're not just dumping somebody on the sidewalk, here you go, you have nothing. So you can rescue 20 or 1 or whatever, but the real challenge is how do we communicate in the right language with the right plan, with the right resources from point A to point B so it's seamless. That's the real key.
Yay. Now, yeah, we're all clapping in sign language in here. Great points that came from all 3 of you. Thank you for bringing that all home. And this is how our Centers for Independent Living, as well as our Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies, are able to help us. They're another how-to resource as we work through emergencies and disasters. And with that, thank you so much, Kurt and Melissa, and appreciate you sharing your expertise with us. All right, we're going to now transition to Anne Marie, and as she's coming up to get mic'd up, which Tim or Gabby, I'll have you come help Anne Marie get mic'd up if needed. But I'm going to introduce Anne Marie. Huh? The shorter version. Yep, we're going to do a shorter version. I don't know. I'll look at that. But Anne Marie is here to talk about, she's going to be talking about civilian active threat training. That is an inclusive approach. I know everybody's taking a quick bio break. That is okay. Please do this at your, participate as you, oh, hold on 1 second. We're going to get wonky over here. Okay. Okay. All right. Cool. Teamwork makes the dream work. All right. Is this yours? All right. Okie dokie. Thank you. All right. Anne Marie McLaughlin is a very wonderful colleague of mine, as well as a mentor as well. She is the Director of Emergency Management and Continuity at New York University. Prior to joining New York University in February of 2018, she served as the emergency manager at University of Massachusetts. Oh, that word I don't know how to say well, Boston. So I'm not going to try it again. Since 2010, right here, did it die? If you, is it not? Oh, it's unmute. You will unmute it in a minute. All right, you're good now, but just when you mute, put it on there. Sorry, we're doing double, sorry. All right, she holds 2 master's degrees in business continuity management from Norwich University and one in English from University of Massachusetts again, Boston. She is a graduate of Harvard University's National Preparedness Leadership Initiative, and she is the past chair of the International Association for Emergency Management, Accessibility and Whole Community Inclusion Caucus. And she is now chair of the International Association for Emergency Management, or IAEM, Universities and College Caucus.
Thank you, Sadie. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. I got a little bit nervous at the beginning when we did the introductory part, when I was, when we were all cautioned not to speak too quickly. I grew up in Boston and I'm now living in New York City, so I kind of talk fast. If I start talking fast or if the accent gets real strong, let me know. Let's see, my pronouns are she, her. I'm a middle-aged, sad to say, I'm a middle-aged woman with reddish curly hair, wearing a gray suit jacket. Very grateful to be here with you all who are here, and those of you who are dialing in remotely. I recognize we are, we're short on time, so I will be moving expeditiously through the material, but I do think this is an important message. I am really happy to be here among kindred spirits. This is a message, this is a shorter version of a presentation I did for the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia's emergency management group. So in many senses, I'm preaching to the choir here. But the need for training is evident. We need to do active threat training. Sadly, the numbers just keep going up and up. I went online this morning to get the updated numbers, and sadly, it's up 52% between 2020 and 2021, active threat incidents. This next slide has a few news stories on it. One of them talks about how the rabbi down in Texas credited active threat training with helping him take decisive action when they were taken hostage, if you recall that incident last year. Brigham and Women's Hospital, my hometown in Boston, they did active threat training. And when the actual incident happened, people said that training was actually very helpful. There's another news story about Walmart employees who credited active threat training with their survival. So preparedness can help, but there's a problem. What is the problem? Many of you will recognize the pictures in this slide. These are screenshots from the very famous Ready Houston Run, Hide, Fight video. This video was extremely helpful. When it came out, it was pretty much the only freely available brief run, hide, fight training video. DHS funded it, Houston did it, and it was lauded as a very helpful video. Now let's turn the clock back. It was around 2012, 2013. I was at the front of a room about this size, only the room was full of people at UMass Boston. We were doing an active threat training session. It was myself and a sergeant from our police department. And we ran this video. And if you know something about people from Boston, people who grew up in the city especially, we are not shy. We did the training, showed the video. Many of you have, just a show of hands, how many people have seen this video? Okay, yes, lots of folks have seen it. So you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, it goes through, it's a bad day at work, basically. And this bad guy comes in looking menacing, shoots a bunch of people, people run around, they push copiers to block themselves into rooms, they sprint to safety, and in the worst case, they prepare to fight. We finished this and we open up the floor to questions. Any questions? Any questions? This woman halfway down And I recognize her, she worked in financial aid. She was a staff person at the university. This video doesn't help me at all. I have a bad knee. I can't run like these people. He was right. That time I realized, you know what? We really need to think about solutions. This is how I got into this. On this slide is a photo of Officer Diane Kirkpatrick and a group. It's a small meeting room, conference room setting with staff members around the table. And you may or may not be able to tell that there's a woman with shoulder length red hair in the far corner who uses a wheelchair. That was Diane Murphy, not incidentally the woman who raised her hand. No, this was somebody else, another member of our community who came forward and said, I don't know, I went to the training, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. My office area is open concept. There's no, I can't close a door. What do I do? So Diane and I, we started meeting with people. We came up with a plan. There's a room very close to where Diane's office was, her cubicle. We found a place for her to go. It was very frustrating because there's not a whole lot of guidance out there. Diane Murphy, of course, before I use people's photos, I typically will ask, is it okay? She said, yes, you can use my picture. I'm a real person. What's the advice for people like me? 8 years later, this is the graphic from SpongeBob, if you know SpongeBob. 8 years later, guess what? FBI came out with a video. Yay, FBI. I had been a thorn in the side of somebody at the FBI who was known for doing presentations. She's now coming to NYU to speak. And I used to always go up at the end and say, excuse me, you're the experts at this. I'm not a police officer. I'm not a special agent, but I've got this community, this wonderful, incredibly diverse community, and I'm trying to help them. We need your guidance. FBI active threat video. Again, it's a great video. It shows people surviving, doing run, hide, fight, but it leaves everybody out. It leaves out people with disabilities. 8 years later, I started going around like, it was like, am I crazy? Am I the only one who knows that there are people with disabilities out there who need guidance? And I would go looking, every time there was a shooting, I would go looking for news coverage for, look, San Bernardino, see? There are people out there. These people with disabilities aren't just hiding in a room somewhere, not out and about. They are out and about. And isn't that a wonderful thing? Another one, I keep looking just to prove, am I crazy? More. There's and these pictures are of people fleeing, evacuating from active shooter situations. And again, we can find people, again, these are people with visible disabilities. We all know, particularly in this room, in this choir, we know that there are people with invisible disabilities. These are the ones we can sort of draw a circle around and say, see, look, these folks are out there. They need our help. So the argument for inclusion, these people are out there. These people are us. We are these people, whole community. CDC, 26% of adults in the United States have some type of disability. This is from the CDC website. This visual is from last year. I went on this morning, same percentage, 26%. If we're planning for only 74% of the community, isn't that a C? Does anybody want to get a C? I don't think so. If you don't care about how am I doing as an emergency manager, we should at least care about the people, right? So this is Chris Goldie. Chris and I would take the same red line train to UMass every day. You know how if you're on a commute, especially if I don't know, do you have public transportation out here? If you're on the same commute with people, You see the same people. Maybe it's at your donut shop or your coffee shop and you're just on the same schedule. Chris and I were on the same schedule. I had gotten into doing inclusive active threat exercises, bringing police and members of the community together to do active threat exercises. And we'll talk more about that later. I saw Chris, I should say, Chris uses a wheelchair. Wheelchair, he would often be on my train, and I saw him, and just the way you sort of chat with people, you get to chatting. I said, Chris, we're doing an active threat exercise next month. I hope you'd be willing to participate in it. We are looking for people with disabilities to participate so we can learn more. There isn't a lot of guidance out there. We need folks to participate. You know, you'll be completely safe. You know, we would love to have you join. He looked me straight in the eye and said, Anne Marie, I'm not going to bother because I'm going to die. If that happens, I'm going to die. I know that. I was holding back tears. We have let people down if we are convinced, if we have people convinced that they have no chance. The whole point to doing active threat training is to encourage people to have a survival mindset. The idea, because we know that it's true that your best options are run, hide, fight. Run is not the best word. I will grant you. This is something, again, you know, we have said out loud. Evacuate, evade, get out. We should not have people feel that they have no chance. So some approaches, most people, let's just start out assuming most people mean well, right? People are not, as someone said earlier, I think it was June, you know, people aren't plotting for, you know, to harm others. But some approaches really do, they just kind of pretend that people with disabilities access functional needs don't exist. You see these videos. If you go see the FBI video, there's nobody with a disability in there. I've often heard approaches acknowledging that people with disabilities access functional needs exist, but they kind of act like they're someplace else, like we're not in the room. A lot of very well-meaning people talk about people with disabilities as objects to be moved, right? Like not partners in survival, partners in preparedness, or they focus on one disability. Sometimes people assume that there is special training that someone else is doing. That's taken care of by those other people over there. Or they think that, you know, there's not going to be a lot of interest in including people with disabilities in training or exercising. They may focus on a very specific you know, response function, which is important, right? Firefighters should know how to help people evacuate. Police should know how to interact with people with disabilities. But very often we find narrow approaches. One thing that just makes me very, you can't tell, I've got some emotions, right? So it makes me very upset if I see someone pretending to be blind, pretending to be using a wheelchair, et cetera, et cetera. Nothing about us without us. Well, we couldn't find anybody. Well, you didn't look hard enough, right? This idea that, you know, people with disabilities might hold back the training. Again, offensive. You're holding yourself back if we are not including people in training. Now, is it all bad? I don't mean to paint a bad picture. This slide includes some screenshots of examples. You know, the interagency, there's a federal document that talks about notification, you know, an inclusive approach to notification. Sadie and I, when we were, when I was chairing the caucus, we did a webinar that I believe is on the website, Sadie. I'm just imagining the gruesome pictures that she's taking. You know, and we included folks, and good for the folks from NFPA, National Fire Protection Agency. They put out a national standard, NFPA 3000, on active threat preparedness, active shooter preparedness. Didn't say a blessed thing about, maybe there was some little tiny something about evacuation. There really wasn't a whole lot in the standard. And of course, I knocked on their door. I said, hey, you're revising your standards. Would you mind being part of this webinar? Good for them for stepping up, because they had to acknowledge they completely omitted it. They hadn't even thought of it. They were all this cool police fire stuff. Well, guess what? Hello, we're here. They're talking about doing trainings with communities. We need to make sure everybody's there. So they participated in this and they were willing to listen. Los Angeles has some great practices. Of course, over in California, you have the amazing Vance Taylor. If you are also a member of the Vance Taylor fan club, I am too. DHS, CISA, they had a little video using actors with disabilities, which is great. Not as glossy, and it doesn't have the same reach as some of the other videos. Now, it's difficult. Whenever you come up on a problem like this, it's usually pretty difficult, and that's why nobody solved it. You know, there's no national comprehensive set of guidelines. You know, it's not, and it's good. It's great to have a lawyer in the room, at least one. You know, the ADA, we worked with our lawyers when we did our video, and at the end I'll show the NYU video. It's only 8 minutes. But, you know, there's not a whole lot of guidance out there. Not a lot of communication happening. Solutions are difficult. Whenever you partner with folks, especially folks you don't necessarily know, we need to build those relationships. And in the law enforcement side, we're used to plan for and not with. And we have a lot of necessary work. You know, in law enforcement, police training is important. Nobody is saying that it is not. On this slide are a series of photos from an urban area security initiative, UASI grant-funded exercise, a SWAT team exercise. Police need to train, no question. I'm from Boston, the place where the marathon bombers were throwing pressure cooker bombs at police officers. There's no question police need training. These photos, there's a photo of me wearing face protection because they use simunitions. There's like, it's like paintball kind of. There's a picture of the unified command post where police, fire, EMS, they're all talking, they're doing the stuff they need to do. There are some photos of SWAT teams all geared up with all of their equipment. We have our fake hostages. Again, you know, they have to play this stuff out. There's a photo of a beautiful young female presenting person with a horrible gunshot wound. This is moulage, it's makeup, it's fake. Police officers need that because they can't show up and see something like this and become incapacitated. If you are police, if you're military, if you're fire, if you're EMS, thank you for your service. We need people who can move to solve the problem. This is jarring. You know, and here's Captain Obvious. This slide has a picture of the commercial Captain Obvious. First responder training is different from civilian training. First responders have extensive previous training. They're a self-selected group. There's danger, I'll go. They're different. Risk-taking, they have a tolerance for risk-taking. They have a tolerance for chaotic situations. Civilians, maybe not so much. I did an active threat drill in a library. I try to avoid generalizations, but as a whole, librarians tend to like order. We're talking about taking over their library with fake guns and screaming. Okay, civilians, they don't train for this. Their job description doesn't necessarily include this, and there are a range of capabilities and previous life experiences. We've all seen news reports where somebody thought it would be a good idea to do a no-notice drill in a library, a school, or whatever, scare the daylights out of everybody. Training wasn't that valuable. When we do training, joint police and civilian training, it's very important. Where do we start? This slide has a little, I forget what this is called, the word cloud, thank you. Word cloud, run. You know, when I started this, I started thinking, well, run, hide, fight. We're off to a bad start already. So there are a bunch of other words in the word cloud: zip, evade, withdraw, flee, rush, split, skedaddle, depart, vamoose, wheel, go, exit, take off. To make the point, okay, look, we're stuck with this run, hide, fight, this is what they're going with. If that doesn't apply to you, pick your favorite word in here. Planning, training, and exercising is critical. Plan with, not for. When we think about planning, we think personal preparedness is critical. Organization planning, looking within your organization, talking to some folks with, grown children in schools or people who work at schools, that's an organization. Hospitals, community organizations. For training itself, the training itself needs to be accessible. Digital accessibility, transcription, ASL, I have to say I've learned so much from Sadie on all the technology, what accommodations are required. When we work on, when we do digital training and videos, making sure those are accessible. And then practices, for exercises, we need to practice with, empower responders and empower civilians. When we are engaging civilians from a law enforcement, I work in a campus safety office, when we're engaging people, we need to meet them where they are. We may have police officers doing this high-speed, intense police training. We need to recognize that that may do more harm than good if people aren't there yet. We need to involve stakeholders in the development of training and exercises, acknowledge different needs of different groups, be partners and plan with, not for. Nothing about us without us. Subject matter expertise is very important when it comes to active threat training. And for the longest time, when we think back to Ready Houston and active threat preparedness, obviously we need experts in tactical firearms experience, military or combat readiness, the kinds of experts who can help train our police officers to respond. Many people in, commentators, it's very easy to be, Monday morning quarterback, whatever. But if you compare what happened in Nashville to what happened in Uvalde, we can draw some conclusions from that. It's very important that our officers are trained up, that people understand explosive, emergency medical, pre-hospital, hazardous materials, criminal justice expertise is important. Fire and building code expertise is important. If we stop here, we haven't done enough. We need to look and then listen to experts in psychology, ADA inclusion experts, CMIS, people who can speak the language of this community that is meeting here in Colorado. And it's exciting to hear that Colorado has historically been a place where, advances have been made. We need the experts in disability integration and people's lived experience. Are all the subject matter experts connected? And this is something that I've found, and this is my clumsy attempt at a diagram, sort of like you have all this big purple circle here, law enforcement, emergency management, fire, EMS. We've been talking about active threat response and all hazards response, et cetera, et cetera. At a certain point, we started talking with the disabilities advocates. In my case, it was because somebody told me, you're not doing a good job. You're not planning for the whole community. You get a C. I don't want to get a C. I want to get an A. Okay, we need to talk to the disabilities people, disabilities inclusion specialists, people from the government, people from independent living centers. We need to talk to people with disabilities themselves in our communities. Our challenges now as we're moving forward, connecting all of the dots, getting everybody together, making things, more connected and more synergistic. And it's not easy. We have key considerations. How do we learn? We ask people. When I started out, there was no guidance. I would be begging people. I talked to people, I probably shouldn't say this, but we talked to people, they said, well, apply for a grant and you can write the video. I said, I'm telling you, I don't know the answers. I'm looking to you for the answers. You're the expert in active threat response. I just have a bunch of people who need guidance. We found out that, we need to think about notification strategies, the role of helpers. Do we guide people to ask for helpers? Can we ask for help? And we played this out in exercises. And these were some of the issues that came out. We have an Institute for Community Inclusion at the University of Massachusetts. It is devoted, its mission is to help people with disabilities find employment, career paths. what better place to practice? We get a bunch of people who are willing to practice, and these are some of the issues that came out. You mentioned, you know, if the building's on fire, please carry me out, right? How do, you know, if there's an active threat, you know, how do people feel about asking for help or offering help? How does that play out? You know, calling 911, letting 911 know about disability.
My name's Andrew, and this is actually very relevant, something that we've been talking about at my office. And, you know, we watched a video of some people evacuating through a window during an active farmer. And the question was brought up, well, what if there's somebody in a wheelchair? And I think it's great to teach them to advocate, but I don't think it's reasonable that I can expect somebody who's not in law enforcement, not in EMS, and not a family member. I don't think it's reasonable that I can expect the, you know, the regular civilian to put their life on the line and protect that person. Do you have any tips for, I even hesitate to use the word bystander, because the way I see it is you're a victim or a potential victim. Do you have any tips or tricks to
Well, I'm glad
for
you
intervention?
asked, because it's a question that comes up, and it reminds me of the magical thinking images that we saw earlier. And, you know, we would like to think that if I just identify a buddy, somebody's going to help me, that then I don't have to worry about this anymore. I have my buddy, I'm on the registry, I have my buddy. We always say, if you have a buddy, sure, you can have a buddy, but you need to be prepared for if your buddy is not there. If your buddy is not a trained law enforcement, military, somebody with military experience, somebody who's trained for this, we don't know how we would act, right? We see how people, sometimes the situation, if you have not been in that situation, you don't know. You might think, I would like to think I would save the day, that I would pick up the chair and disable the shooter and make sure that the gun stops firing. But I don't know. I could be, I don't know how I would react. So we advocate for people to be creative in their thinking, to think through, what are my options? If you are not somebody who can climb out a window, then you're not thinking about windows as your options, right? You are looking for the closed room. Maybe there's a bathroom on the floor that locks, that kind of interactive training. And if you, as an emergency manager, go to somebody's workplace setting, you can walk through, and that's what we did with Diane Murphy. We talked through her situation in her area. People want the perfect answer for how I'm definitely going to survive, 100% no chances. And what we do is we offer strategies. And the most important thing is we encourage people to believe that they can survive. Because if you're, my friend Chris, this broke my heart. If you believe you're not going to survive, you lessen your chances, right? Just to get through, I'm plowing through the material, and then we'll get to questions afterwards. And you may you may find some ideas in the active threat video that I'll show. For exercises, first responder focused exercises are important. They will have role players, but the role players are there for the benefit of the police. That is not a bad thing. The police need role players, you know, to help them know what to do. Civilians, you know, can sign up for this. They may have this kind of opportunity. If it's a very police-focused exercise, you know, you are a role player, not a participant in the exercise. A civilian-focused exercise, the civilians are players. If you've taken HC, you know there's a difference between being a role player and being a player. You are a player in the exercise. You are practicing your understanding of the run, hide, fight protocol. There's less predictability here, right? Because if you have civilians, they may decide that they're going to go in a different way. For police, it's a challenge, and it's good to acknowledge it. In a police-focused exercise, you know where the people are going to go, and the police designers of the exercise may design some challenges in there for their officers. But the people who run the exercise know what those are. We're gonna surprise them. We're gonna have somebody come in this way instead of that way. Civilian focused is less predictable because who knows what I'm gonna do, right? So we worked with the UMass Boston Police. This photo is of my dear friend Valerie Haven. Valerie is blind. She was probably the most prepared person. We went through a building to tell them that we were going to use it for an active threat exercise, and we invited people to participate. In all of our interviews with folks in the building, she had the best plan. She had thought about it the most. Her parents were incidentally military, and she has an incredible survival mindset. She went back to school for emergency management, incidentally, after working with us on these exercises. The young man in the photo is Justin Camo. He is now the emergency manager at UMass. So we did a number of these disability exercises that included people with disabilities, with the intent on better understanding our community, better understanding what should we tell people. The planning team included law enforcement and access functional needs SMEs, subject matter experts. We involved the FEMA Region 1 disability integration specialist, and there were lots of meetings and training. Now, this is difficult. Doing this kind of work is difficult because, again, there's no, we all like to follow a checklist, right? We're making the checklist. I mentioned this already, the Institute for Community Inclusion Civilian Response Drill. This was a smaller group. This was not a big exercise with police with their fake guns drawn. This was a smaller group. This is Sergeant Chris Camborian working with the receptionist, who is a person with intellectual disabilities. He's public about that. He's very proud of his job at the Institute for Community Inclusion. He did an NPR interview. Here he is showing Chris how he cleared out under his desk. His desk underneath had been full of boxes. And having gotten the training, he learned that he should probably clear that out so he would have a place to hide. We did this kind of like a workshop. We had simulated gunshots and people practiced. Here is Jen Bose. She is a woman who is blind. She has a service dog. And for the first round, she was a little bit tentative, and who can blame her? There was no guidebook. There was no, here's what you're supposed to do. It was kind of like us saying, well, we're going to practice this. We will promise you, we're not going to bully you. Nobody's going to corner you. Nobody's going to touch you, but there will be simulated loud noises. You will get the understanding that something bad is happening, and you should figure out, how would I react in this situation? And this is their office space. So her first round, she said, I don't really feel comfortable. I said, that's fine. You can be a controller. She sat near the elevator, and her job was to tell people we are doing an exercise. If anybody came to the floor, that was her job. After the first round happened, she said, you know what, I'd really like to play. And it was powerful. We did debriefs afterwards, right? We talked through, well, what was it like for you? And she said, it wouldn't have occurred to me to turn the lights off in my office, but I remembered that because of the training. And we started thinking, well, that's probably something we should put on a checklist to help people prepare, right? If you are a person who is deaf or hard of hearing, is there something you should remember to silence in your space if you are hiding? She said, make sure they know I was a controller first, but then also participated as an actor. I tested my own response to a shooter in the workplace. So, when we did this after action, people talk through the very issue that you bring up from your school, the wheelchair, people, if somebody's in a wheelchair and yo-yo, feeling you're on your own, right? What do I do? A fire drill, it's one thing you're supposed to do. Maybe it's you go to an area of rescue assistance, an area of refuge, or you evacuate the building. This, you have to make a decision based on your perception of what is happening. There were feelings of independence. People felt proud of themselves that despite not having somebody in DC telling them what they were supposed to do, that they figured it out. I need to know how to ask for help. This idea of, will somebody help me? These situations just kind of happened in the moment, right? And it's the kind of thing that we can say, yes, you can ask for help, but you need to be prepared for what if the other person doesn't, right? How can I, and that's a horrible thing to think about. But you know what, preparedness helps us think through. For people without disabilities, many of them were not sure, because this office was a mix. Should I help the person? Right? What am I supposed to do? I don't want to break etiquette. I don't want to do the wrong thing. A lot of people didn't want to participate that day. And again, who can blame them? Because not a lot of people do this. But I think it's happening more and more. If you are designing a full-scale exercise, and you just call me, I'm on, you can reach me through Sadie if you haven't done this before. We were very meticulous about safety. We always involve psychological safety as well. We have counselors there. We tend to be very aware of the potential for, people being upset by this. We follow HC. We brought in subject matter experts. We provided a lot of training. We had a wristband system, right? Because we're a university. We had a lot of criminal justice students. Hey, I'll do anything. Okay, great. You get a blue wristband. You have the people working in the building. I don't know if I really want to do this. Okay, you get a green wristband. So the police officers know, hey, look, if you want people to do something crazy, go to the blue wristband people. Okay. And that helped us kind of marry the two approaches, training for officers and training for civilians. Now there's a photo here. It's a picture of a classroom. And you'll see an officer, a young police officer, is in the doorway with a long gun, fake. You can see Valerie. Valerie was willing to be a role player in this. She was hiding in the back. And you talk about helpers. This woman who was part of the MRC, the Medical Reserve Corps, she decided she was going to be Valerie's helper. She volunteered. So Valerie suddenly had a helper, which was great. The police officer, and this is why this training is phenomenal. It was good for Valerie. Valerie learned. For the police officer, he's coming down the hall. He knows that the fake bad guy is in this classroom with all these students. He comes around the corner and Valerie yells out, he says, everybody hands up. Valerie says, I'm blind and I'm here and I have a cane. His eye, I'm looking at him. I'm looking, he was not expecting this, right? But guess what? Just like those photos from the news stories, Valerie is out there. People with disabilities are out there. These police officers need to be ready for it, right? It can't all be criminal justice students who are, running around doing it. Needs to be representative of the whole community. So we had, as I mentioned, choices for actors. There were people who just wanted to be in the back. Yes.
Was the gentleman in the doorway the active shooter, or
No,
was he just a
he
police officer?
was the police officer. He came around the corner.
Repeat it, what we missed in the mic.
Oh, was the gentleman in the doorway an active shooter, or was he role-playing active shooter, or was he a police officer?
He was the police officer. So he came around the corner. We were all in this room. He immediately fake shot the police officer who was pretending to be the bad guy. And then he said, everybody hands up. We had all these students on the ground and Valerie called out. And Valerie said, it occurred to me that I had something in my hands. I'm not supposed to have something in my hands, right? They looked for the open hands, but she has her cane. And she has explained to me that her cane is her independence. She is not going to put the cane down. So she called out, I am blind, I am holding a cane.
This is Mike. I actually participated in a active shooter with live blank rounds. So you could hear the smoke and hear the sound, see the smoke, whatever. But when I evacuated the building, I had hearing loss, and I was running away. Officers were running up. They were yelling something. I wasn't sure what they were yelling. So think about my mom who's deaf, or someone else who's deaf that's running, and law enforcement is acting, they're command-driven personnel. And if people don't respond, they automatically think the worst, given what's going on out there in the world. There's not a lot of time for them. They're like, I wonder if this person has, you know what I mean?
And that's why this is so important, because having that interaction with you, it kind of reminds them there are real people out there who are not bad guys, not bad women, who maybe don't hear the commands, right? It makes for powerful training for officers and greater awareness, so that as we, do training with folks, we let people know, like Valerie knew from all of her training to say, I'm blind, I'm holding a cane, like I'm not letting go of my cane is what she was saying, really.
I was just thinking information, we don't hear information, and so we're not hearing information, we're not hearing the sounds around us. We make, weird decisions to fight, flight, or hide, or things of that nature. So we talked about that with the law enforcement, and they were like, hey, we hadn't thought about that, right?
A lot of times they don't think about it.
Yeah.
They're not thinking about it. We had somebody with an intellectual disability, and she would, no matter what the issue was, she would run to the ladies' room, the women's room. And that was kind of it. And the more we talk to people, the more we understand, what people's responses might be. And, it's awesome that you're doing exercises and you're participating. We gave people choices, as I mentioned. We also did a briefing with folks, what's it like to be an actor? Some people may feel empowered. We get a lot of giggling and like, this is fun. This is like a game. Maybe nervous laughter. Some might really feel afraid. And it's important to think about it before you go into an exercise. And it's important to talk, that the exercise you're participating in, that they have the ground rules. We had ground rules. Nobody's going to corner you. Nobody's going to bully you. We had, if you feel overwhelmed, let somebody know.
Can I add one more thing to that? The other thing about hearing loss is that, oh no, I'm getting old, I lost my train of thought. The sounds, my mom and some of my deaf friends, they make functional noises that they are not aware they're making. Whether it's like, guttural noises or bodily noises or what have you, kind of a dead giveaway. So I think what's awesome about these exercises is to kind of like also, hey, you were hiding fantastically, but you made a lot of noise. Stop burping. No more carbonated drinks for you when you're hiding.
Exactly. And if we don't practice in a safe environment, how are we going to learn these things? So video, again, it's funny, Sadie and I have been involved in IAEM for a number of years, and somebody once said to, asked me to be a consultant. And I said, I'm not a consultant, I'm an activist. I never thought I would describe myself in that way, but I think a lot of us in this room probably are activists. And when we look at videos, as soon as I was in a place with a budget to create a video, I suddenly said, well, we're going to make our own video, because apparently I'm not a very good activist, because I haven't been able to get the national ones to look the way I think they should. Not that I think that there are many successful approaches, right, to active threat videos, but one requirement should be inclusion. And inclusion, not just one disability, but multiple disabilities. So with video considerations, we're going to end up with showing the NYU active threat video. A lot of input. We got a lot of input from people with disabilities on campus. We brought in Vance Taylor to be a consultant. We brought in Valerie to be a consultant and to act in the video. We need to make sure that the videos have captioning, an audio description. We have, if you would like the audio described version, you can get that from NYU. We got feedback. We had a disability and inclusion meeting where people provided feedback to the video. And we have to assume that people with disabilities are going to be watching the video, are going to be a part of the audience. For too long, it's been them over there. No, it's us. It's us, it's the whole community. So I'm going to share this, and then we can open up to questions. You got that in the back?
But don't stay behind or hesitate because people are confused or frozen with indecision.
Get yourself out of danger first and foremost. Warn other people as you go and help them escape with you.
Can we rewind it? Sorry. Yes, and trigger warning. It's not a.
Hi, I'm Ariana,
And I'm Jordan.
and we are both members of the NYU community, just like you. And just like you, we want to promote safety on our campus.
So in the next few minutes, we are going to talk specifics about what you need to do in the event of an active threat on campus, such as an attacker with a knife or a gun.
We've all seen school shooter stories in the news, and nobody wants to talk about the worst case scenario.
But if we think about it and have a basic strategy to take action, it'll make you much more likely to survive.
The NYPD and NYU Campus Safety are our partners in protecting this campus. But we are our first and most important line of defense if we ever encounter an active threat.
This is our campus, and the hard reality is that if you're at the scene, you are going to have to take action and run, hide, or fight to survive. Here's what to do in the case of an active threat on campus.
Escaping the danger is the best option if you can. If you hear gunshots, get an alert on your phone, see people running or screaming, or anything else that seems like it might be an immediate threat, leave your belongings behind and get out and as far away as quickly and as quietly as possible. Get out right away, even if others stay behind. You can encourage others to go with you.
Come on.
But don't stay behind or hesitate because people are confused or frozen with indecision.
Get yourself out of danger first and foremost. Warn other people as you go, and help them escape with you if it is safe to do so. But if you sense immediate danger, just get out of there, regardless of whether they agree to follow you or not. You want to buy as much time as you can and create as much distance between you and the attacker as possible. Remember, if you can't safely go down and out the building, you can always go up. Go wherever it makes the most sense to quickly get away from the attacker. That may or may not be the same place that you came in. Remember, many of the buildings at NYU have multiple stairwells on the same floor.
Try not to draw attention to yourself. Shooters look for easy targets, so the harder you are to hear, see, or find, the better. Once you are safe, call 911 to report the threat. Any information you can give police may save lives in real time. And once you are safe, try to stop others from heading into the scene.
911, yes. Police and ambulance. There's been a shooting. I don't know how many people are shot, but some people have definitely been hurt. If you can send somebody quick, please.
If you can't run and get out safely, then find a secure place to hide where the active shooter is less likely to find you. Again, you want to be quick and quiet.
Make sure to lock and barricade the doors and hide under furniture and behind desks. If you can do so safely, use a rubber doorstop to block the door from opening, or a belt tightened around the door hinge to keep it shut. Improvise barricades using any heavy, large, or bulky items you can move around in the room.
Put your phone on silent. A vibrating phone still makes noise and could draw attention to your hiding spot. Turn off lights, remain quiet, and stay out of the active shooter's view.
Avoid huddling in the same place. Try to spread out your hiding spots to different places in the room so the attacker has less concentrated targets. Try to hide under heavy things in the room that can provide protection from bullets, such as countertops, desks, and filing cabinets.
You may have to stay hidden for a while until the all clear from campus security or NYPD. If you have immediate information about the attacker's movements or location and can safely and quietly do so, text Campus Safety using the Safe NYU app.
If you have your phone on you, be on the lookout for an all-clear message from NYU Campus Safety. But remember to keep your phone on silent.
Remember, an aggressor has a limited amount of time to commit an act of violence before the police arrive. If you can't run away or hide, and your life is at risk, then do whatever you can to frustrate, slow down, or impede the attacker.
In the very worst case scenario that the attacker is moving in on your location or you fear for your life, you may have to be ready to fight. Stay calm, focus, and mentally prepare to fight for your life.
If all else fails, and only as a very last resort, attack the shooter with whatever makeshift weapons you can find. Sharp scissors, fire extinguishers, chairs, etc. that can disable or disarm.
And when we say fight, we mean fight like hell. Don't hold back. Don't be afraid to use anything in the room as a makeshift weapon or as much force as you can muster.
It is best, when possible, to work with others. The more people that attack at the same time, the harder it will be for the attacker to resist. Separate the attacker from their weapon when you can, but do not pick up the weapon. In a tense and chaotic situation, you do not want to be mistaken for the attacker.
When the police arrive, leave your hands up where the officers can see them.
Keep your hands in the air. Walk towards the sound of my voice.
Stay calm and don't make any sudden movements, and listen to the officer's instructions.
Do not stop to ask the officers for help or directions when evacuating. Just proceed in the direction from which they entered the premises and follow any specific directions that they give you.
Keep in mind that the police are there to stop the attacker first and foremost. They will not stop to help the injured until the attacker has been subdued, or else more people may get hurt. Help for the injured will be on the way.
So those are our specific tips to help you survive an active threat on campus. Remember, run first if you can. It is always best and the safest option to get away.
If you can't run, hide in a secure room behind a locked and barricaded door. Stay calm, silence your phone, stay out of view, and hide behind any heavy object if you can.
And if you can't hide and find yourself in the line of attack, fight for your life and team up with others to injure and subdue the attacker with whatever makeshift weapons you can find.
As always, if you see something, say something. No matter where you are, keep aware of your environment and think about your exit plan. We all want to keep our campus and community safe. In the extremely rare case of an active threat on campus, following the strategies and actions we just outlined can make a difference in your safety.
For more information on what to do in case of an active threat on campus, consult the NYU Campus Safety website. And to stay informed with live alerts and to help keep our campus safe, make sure to install the Safe NYU app on your phone.
Remember your options: run, hide, or fight. Thank you for taking the time to pay attention and for prioritizing safety at NYU.
So that was our attempt at, creating an inclusive active threat video. We're going to be updating it now that New York City. We're going to be updating it, so always looking for ways of improving it. I will have to say, I don't know if the sign language interpreters on this meeting would agree. Whenever we were looking for people to use sign language, it took us some time to explain what we wanted. They thought, well, you want us to interpret a training? No, we want you to be in a video because we need people who are using ASL to show representation of the community. So, oh, okay, yeah, that sounds really cool. If you recognize the guy who, one of the people in there is he does the interpretation for the city of New York.
5 minutes.
All right. Any questions? That's me, I'm Jude.
Yeah, what were the 3 choices you gave people in terms of participating in that exercise? And they were color choices.
There were color choices. There actually, now that I'm thinking, there were 2 choices. You could, if you're up for anything, you want to do what, you want to do whatever the police need you to do, within reason, obviously. But if the police need people to go this way or that way, whatever, you are adventurous, you would get 1 color. If you were tentative, let's say, or you wanted to stay, here's the 3. If you're adventurous, if you're tentative, you're not really sure. And then if you want to stay in your workplace, if you wanted to, we're using your building and you want to stay in your workspace. So that way the police know, okay, Mary, Joe, you want to be here? Okay, fine, you're going to stay here. We need some people who want to do something adventurous. Okay, they would look for that different wristband.
Hi, it's Andrew again. So a question that I have is, I have, just for background, I'm previous law enforcement. I've done the high-speed tactical shoot 'em up trainings, and it's very loud and very chaotic. But people with service animals, would you advise them to leave their service animal? Would you advise them to take it? Because I don't know how an animal would react with the gunshots. Would they bark? Would they, I don't know.
So I would never, I think it's the same as Valerie with her cane, right? This is, I would not in a million years suggest that somebody be separated from their service animal. And it is something that, so we did simulated, the ICI version, we had, it was like a toy weapon. We used, it was like pop, 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 pop. The other drill was blanks, so that was louder. We had ear protection, full, eye protection for safety and all of that. It depends. So people should be able to participate at their level of comfort. If somebody is concerned that their dog would act badly. However, I would say maybe if your dog is going to act really bad. Right, a real event. I mean, I'm not an expert at service animals. I don't really know the answer to that.
Do we have any experts in the room? Oh, I think we do.
We have an answer on virtual as well.
A virtual, an answer to this question?
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
Sorry, it is.
Oh, it's, sorry.
It's a good question, right? I can tell you Jen's animal didn't have a problem, but it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, this is Tim. So the response actually comes from Charlotte Stasio
Okay.
and her company Griffin. And she says that they conduct service animal training for responders and that most service animals are trained to deal with chaos/commotion. There's no specific mention about gunfire, however.
Right, we have some other centers for independent living. Do you by chance have any comment, feedback? Good question. We'll start researching the answer and getting it available. We keep learning together and growing together when those questions are asked. All right, any other final questions?
Maybe. I would, yeah,
Okay.
one thing really.
And then in the front too. Davey's getting her steps in today, exercise.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. The one thing with the service animal, I think most individuals would never leave that dog behind, ever. It's just like, you're so trusting in it.
Hi, my name is Billy Allen, white male, silver hair. Anyways, just an FYI, in the state of Colorado, and if you're in an active shooter situation and you want to use your cell phone, we have a feature here that we allow you to use text to 911 instead of calling, speaking. So if you want to be discreet and quiet, you can do text to 911 out here in the state of Colorado. Just about almost all counties you can. I think there's 3 counties that are left, can't do that. Excuse me, sorry.
That's fantastic. And I think up front, was there a question up here?
Do you mind if I voice for you? Okay, what if we used a mobile device? And we can't hold up our hands.
And this is why training with police is so important, so that they know.
Thank you for that wonderful question as well.
What does she win?
What does she win? Oh, that's Melissa. Melissa's handing out Lamborghinis, I think. All right, with that, we are coming up at the top of the hour. Emery, thank you. It's always been, I always love learning from you. We all learn together and we all have learned in here, so yay, thank you. All right. And I think a couple of our presenters talked about a yo-yo today, right? You're on your own, yo. First time we heard this was last fall at a local emergency preparedness council. What does C stand for? Emergency Managers Committee? Commission. Training. We were at a conference for it, LEPC. Local Emergency Planning Committee conference. And when we heard this, one of our local emergency managers taught us about yo-yo, you're on your own. Tim, do you want to come up and describe this? Or actually, if you bring it up, I'll describe it. So, ooh, maybe not. This one's really kind of hard to see. All right, good. All right. So as we're learning and growing together, what we have, Amy and I always have these really neat, they're invisible to other people, but her and I could actually see everything demonstrated there. We talk about, tomorrow we'll even talk about those CMIST resources, CMIST resources. And what we're trying to do is have everybody understand, and thank you to June Kales and Alexandra Enders on creating a memory tool to help all of us have shared language. What we're trying to do here is, if you go down, Tim, we talk about everybody being able to understand and know what their CMIST resources are, CMIST resources are, and then anybody will be able to speak up and say, these are the resources I need, so that somebody, which in Colorado is our program, and we're helping design it all the way down to the local level, so nobody is left behind. And when in emergency management, they're always talking about funding. And so this is over here, we definitely have to work with these colors to be more accessible. So I'm trying to verbally describe what's in this triangle here. Where locals have their limitations is where we can learn where this gap is over here. We can learn from our people with lived experience also to help us identify what are the CMIST resources that we could fill up, so that the county, then when we go to the county, could also help us fill that gap with funding. And then we get up to the state, and then where all of our funding is filling in those CMIST gaps as well, as we learn from each other. And so we're trying to get this right. So this is still in draft form. We do want your feedback, especially because we have major subject matter experts in the audience as well as online. And so we're trying to learn better to have that shared language between funding and CMIST resources as we continue to grow together and learn what we don't know, because we don't know. And with that, we have concluded our pre-conference. Really great gratitude and to all of you who have presented today, great leaders and champions as well as mentors, and then all of you for being here virtually and also in the room. We have 2 more days to go, but it's not full days, just so you know. It starts at 11. Tomorrow is day 1, and then day 2 starts at 8 and ends at 1 on Thursday. And so with that, please enjoy your evening. Try to get out and enjoy the weather and have fun. Thank you.
Reading off the slide.